Chapter 839. What did you say? Lan Zhao's voice was filled with shock. How can she not be the empress? Rong Xiu's expression didn't change and his voice was clear. If you don't believe me, you can ask her yourself. Or you can ask anyone from the Tianling dynasty. Hearing that Rong Xiu didn't sound like he was joking, Lan Zhao also realized that something was amiss. There was no need to lie about this. Since Rong Xiu said this, it must be true. They were only happy that Yulan had returned and didn't ask her that much. What's going on? Is it because she doesn't have a Tianjing Yuan meridian? Back then she was indeed given the title of empress because of this. However, it didn't seem appropriate to remove her title just because of this, right? The Tianling dynasty must have accumulated 1,000 years of luck to have a genius like her. If they had a brain, they wouldn't do such a thing. Rong Xiu lowered his eyes and hid the murderous intent in them. His thick eyelashes cast a faint shadow under his eyelids, making the aura around him seem much colder. Because her Xuanhuan identity is already dead. Big Bao. Big Bao. Dugu Mabao was watching Chu Luiyue fight with the puppet when he heard Lan Zhao's anxious voice. He frowned. What's wrong? Lan Zhao had always placed great importance on his image, including his voice. If nothing major happened, he definitely wouldn't sound like this. Nervous and angry. Dugu Mabao's heart skipped a beat. Lan Zhao hurried back with an extremely ugly expression on his face. Even when Yulan didn't come back for a few years, he didn't show such an expression. Lan Zhao closed his eyes and forced himself to calm down. Where's Fifth? Ask him to come back. Dugu Mabao didn't understand and frowned. What's wrong? What happened? Lan Zhao didn't answer directly and only urged. Ask him to come back first. I have something to say. Dugu Mabao could only call Diwu Zhangzi back. What are you doing? I'm teaching those kids well. Diwu Zhangzi was speaking when he saw the strange expressions on the two's faces, and his voice came to an abrupt halt. What was going on? The three of them had known each other for many years and understood each other very well. The current atmosphere was simply too rare. Something must have happened. Especially Lan Zhao, his face seemed to be covered in a layer of ice. This expression was normal on De Bao's face, but on him, it was too strange. Dugu Mabao said, Now that everyone is here, can you tell me what's going on? Lan Zhao raised his chin and spoke to Diwu Zhangzi. Look after De Bao first. The two of them looked at each other blankly. What is going on? Do you know why you changed her body? The two of them frowned. They had always thought that it had something to do with her memory loss, so they had never asked. Lan Zhao took a deep breath and said word by word, This is because you died of sexual intercourse. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Even when he wanted to get the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill back then, he had a lot of discussions with Jiang Yuqing. This was the first time he begged like this. Jiang Yuqing paused for a long time before finally nodding. Okay. After Xiahou Rong went out, he quickly left with Xiahou Yushu and the rest. Other than him and Jiang Yuqing, nobody knew what the two of them were talking about in the study. Almost everyone thought that everything related to the marriage was going smoothly, and they just had to wait for the wedding to be over. Then the two aristocratic families could join forces. After returning to the residence, Xiahou Rong immediately ordered his men to bring Xiahou Tingan back. Everyone in the Xiahou residence was very shocked. They just fought for him not long ago, so why did they have to bring him back? But he's my biological son after all, and he's the one I doted on the most for so many years. It's normal that I can't bear to let him go. Very quickly, they sent back news that Xiahou Tingan had been staying with the lady from Chunfeng restaurant. When Xiahou Rong heard this, he was furious and immediately went over personally. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 841. When Xiahou Rong came, it was evening and Xiahou Tingan was eating with Xiao Dai. As if it was because she came from Chunfeng restaurant, Xiao Dai wasn't good at cooking, and the food she cooked was hard to swallow. Xiahou Tingan was born a rich young master, so everything he ate and used was the best. How could he be used to such food? At the start, he could still bring Xiao Dai to restaurants outside, but as time passed, he didn't have much money on him. One had to know that when he left the Xiahou residence, he had very backbone and left without a single cent. The wealth in the cosmic ring that he gave Xiao Dai was all used to redeem Xiao Dai, so he didn't have much left. The two of them had been living a simple life for quite a few days. Xiahou Tingan originally felt uncomfortable, and with the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill being stolen, he had been very uneasy and fearful during this period of time. He had no energy in the day and couldn't sleep at night. Even if he occasionally fell asleep, he would have nightmares. After a period of torment, he had lost a lot of weight. Xiahou Tingan started to regret it. Even though this residence was clean and tidy, it couldn't be compared to the Xiahou residence. There was also no one to serve him. He was used to living a life of luxury. Experiencing the life of an ordinary person was even more unbearable than killing him. Actually, Xiahou Tingan had thought of going back to admit his mistake. But on the one hand, he couldn't bring himself to do so as he was afraid of being mocked by others. On the other hand, he was also worried that the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill would be exposed. Rather than that, he might as well live like this. However, this tranquility was quickly broken. Bang! The sound of the door being kicked was heard, and Xiahou Tingan and Xiao Dai were both shocked. The two of them looked at each other and heard Xiahou Rong's angry voice from outside. Unfilial son. Come out now. Xiahou Tingan's heart skipped a beat. They must have found out that I lost the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill. He instantly stood up in a panic and instinctively wanted to escape. Xiao Dai looked at him in confusion. Second young master, is the person outside Lord Xiahou? He seems to be here to find you. Just say that I'm not here. Xiahou Tingan hurriedly said and wanted to jump out of the window. But before he could move, his waist was entangled by a rope. Xiahou Rong pulled hard. Xiahou Tingan instantly fell backward. Bang! He fell heavily in front of Xiahou Rong. Second young master. Seeing this scene, Xiao Dai shouted in a panic. She clutched the door tightly with both hands, looking very worried. Xiahou Rong glanced at her coldly. This young lady looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. She had a small face without any makeup and was delicate and pretty. She looked especially pitiful when she cried. She was indeed very different from Jiang Yuji's arrogant and overbearing appearance. No wonder this unfilial son would do such a thing. Scram! Xiahou Rong bellowed. From now on, don't let me see you in the West Hill. Xiao Dai's body shuddered, and tears streamed down her face as she looked at Xiahou Tingan with reluctance. I can leave, but please don't hurt second young master. It's all my fault. Xiahou Rong frowned and his aura became colder. Fear flashed across Xiao Dai's face as she hurriedly said goodbye to Xiahou Tingan and ran away crying. Only the father-son duo was left in the yard. Xiahou Rong directly dragged him into the room and looked down at him with a dignified expression. Father. Xiahou Tingan was slightly more awake at this point. Seeing this scene, he vaguely guessed something and shouted guiltily. Don't call me. Xiahou Rong rudely interrupted him. Speak. Where's the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill? Xiahou Tingan hurriedly said. Father, I don't know. I really don't know. A loud slap sounded. Xiahou Rong harshly slapped Xiahou Tingan, causing him to fall to the ground. Speak. Xiahou Tingan coughed and spat out a mouthful of blood. Even 2 of his teeth were knocked out. This showed how harsh Xiahou Rong was. I really don't know. Xiahou Tingan was also filled with grievances. Apart from you, who else could steal something without anyone noticing? Xiahou Rong gritted his teeth. Did you find someone to help you? Now that he thought about it, the item might have been lost on the night someone eavesdropped on him. The person who ran away might have purposely gone to lure the tiger away from the mountain to make it easier for this unfilial son to take action. Xiahou Tingan knew that the matter had been exposed and he couldn't deny it. But, that item really isn't with me. Father. Listen to my explanation. I did want to steal the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill that day, but someone snatched it away the moment I opened it. Until now, I still don't know where it is. Xiahou Tingan hurriedly recounted what happened that day. If it's really in my hands, why aren't you using it now? Father, I'm speaking the truth. After hearing Xiahou Tingan's explanation, Xiahou Rong's heart gradually turned cold. If everything he said was true, then someone purposely followed him into the study that day and took the chance to steal the item. The most terrifying thing was that Xiahou Tingan didn't see what the other party looked like. He didn't have a single clue. If he wanted to find the person, wouldn't it be like finding a needle in a haystack? What Jiang Yuqing wanted was to send the item back perfectly within a day. Xiahou Rong's vision turned black, and he almost fell to the ground. Father. Upon seeing this, Xiahou Tingan hurriedly went to help him up, but he was pushed away. Unfilial son. Do you know how big of a trouble you've caused this time? If Jiang Yuqing finds out that the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill is missing, our family won't be able to bear the consequences. Not to mention that I want to protect Xiahou Tingan, but if this matter gets out, I won't even be able to protect myself. The 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill is the Tianling royal family's heirloom. If it lands in anyone's hands, it will become a huge hidden danger. The other party has obviously been eyeing us for a long time. They definitely want to make use of this 9 clouds yuan recovery pill. Suddenly, a white light flashed across Xiahou Rong's mind. Who in this world would be so stubborn about this item? To the point of spending so much effort to snatch it? You have to know that I took it from the princess 2 years ago. A ridiculous thought surfaced in his mind, and Xiahou Rong couldn't help but tremble. Upon seeing his reaction at the side, Xiahou Tingan's heart also hung up. It seems like this matter is even more serious than I thought. But at this point, Xiahou Tingan still thought that he was worried about Jiang Yuqing. Thus his eyes turned and he had some thoughts. He inched closer, lowered his voice and said, "Father, don't worry. Aren't you just worried about Jiang Yuqing? Actually, you don't have to think so much. Jiang Yuqing was also involved in the princess's incident back then, so he definitely can't escape. With this, he really won't dare to do anything to you." Xiahou Rong suddenly looked at him in shock and anger. What else do you know? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 842. Xiahou Tingan was shocked by his reaction and instinctively stepped back, but his collar had already been grabbed tightly. "Speak. You heard everything that day, didn't you?" asked Xiahou Rong harshly. Father. Cough cough. Xiahou Tingan grabbed his hand and wanted to pry it away, but he started coughing uncomfortably. "I just heard a little." Cough cough. However, Xiahou Rong didn't believe him. His face was unprecedentedly dark. Xiahou Tingan had never seen him with such an expression, and he couldn't help but swallow his remaining words. After a while, Xiahou Rong released his hand and stood up. "Come with me to the Jiang mansion. When you reach there, you just have to tell Jiang Yuqing what I said previously, but you can't let him know what you heard. Do you understand?" Xiahou Tingan nodded nervously. Xiahou Rong looked at him with deep eyes and sighed in his heart. It's obvious that there are still people in Xiling City who want to find out the truth behind the princess's death back then. These people might be in the imperial court or they might be in the marketplace. Also, there was something that he couldn't help but worry about. Those people might have already returned. Red Moon Desert. After several attempts, Chu Luiyue finally managed to push the puppet in front of her to the ground within 15 minutes. Her body was almost covered in wounds, and there was even a trace of blood at the side of her lips. She looked very disheveled. After training here for a month, she felt that she had died a few times. Every time she felt that she could no longer continue, she would rely on the stubbornness at the bottom of her heart to forcefully endure it. However, her efforts weren't wasted. Other than her physical strength becoming stronger and her movement skills increasing, she had unexpectedly broken through to the intermediate stage 6 when she fought with this puppet. Previously, she had stayed in the heaven-wrecking Holy Seed's divine domain for a year and had accumulated a lot of origin power. In addition, during this period of time, she had been crazily fighting with these puppets. Her combat strength had constantly soared, so it was normal for her to advance. "Big baby. I won," said Chu Luiyue happily as she heaved a heavy sigh. Beside her, the peak 7th Order puppet had already been beaten to a pulp. However, no one responded to his words. The surroundings were quiet. Chu Luiyue stared blankly for a moment before taking a few steps closer to the lake. "Debao?" Only then did he hear Debao's voice. "We all saw it. You did very well." After being here for a long time, Chu Luiyue became more familiar with them. For some reason, Debao's tone sounded a little off. She blinked and asked tentatively, "Debao, why do you look so unhappy?" Actually, it couldn't be said that he was unhappy. Instead, it was more like he was suppressing some kind of anger. Although he seemed very calm when he spoke, for some reason Chu Luiyue had this feeling. Could it be that someone had provoked him? "It's just a small matter. It doesn't matter." Debao briefly skimmed over it and changed the topic. "You said before that you wanted to go back to West Hill after winning, right?" Chu Luiyue nodded. Calculating the time, it should be too late to go back now. "I'll send you back," Debao said calmly. Chu Luiyue was happy at first, but then she sensed that something was wrong. She frowned. "Debao, are you really okay?" Debao didn't answer. The yellow sand under Chu Luiyue's feet suddenly began to flow. The next moment, the scene in front of her changed. She composed herself and looked around. Only then did she realize that Debao had sent her directly back to the intersection of the 3 realms. Then, she saw a figure rushing over from the direction of the Red Moon Desert. Although he said that he had rushed over, he was actually sent out directly. "Ouch, my waist." Mu Hongyu held her waist and grimaced in pain. However, halfway through her sentence, she saw Chu Luiyue in front of her. "Luyu?" she immediately exclaimed. Then she ran directly towards Chu Luiyue. Ah, it's really you? Great. She originally wanted to rush over and hug Chu Luiyue, but when she reached Chu Luiyue she remembered that she was covered in dirt and stopped herself. Chu Luiyue supported her arm. Mu Hongyu widened her eyes and saw that Chu Luiyue seemed to be injured. She was about to speak with heartache when she realized that the pressure on her body seemed to be heavier than before. It seemed to be much stronger. Luyu, have you broken through to the intermediate 6th stage? Mu Hongyu was overjoyed. After seeing Chu Luiyue nod with a smile, she immediately circled her several times in amazement. You're amazing. How long has it been and you've risen 2 levels in a row? Let me tell you, bang. A voice suddenly fell beside the two of them. It was Yi Ranran. Ouch. She was still holding the medicine cauldron tightly, as if she was afraid that it would be broken. Chu Luiyue glanced out of the corner of her eye and saw that the medicine cauldron was filled to the brim with elixirs. At a glance there were all kinds of elixirs and their levels were not low. Chu Luiyue's eyelids twitched. Ranran. Mu Hongyu hurriedly helped her up. Yi Ranran was still in a daze. When she saw their faces she was pleasantly surprised. Her round little face had lost a lot of weight, and her eyes were red. I finally found you. She didn't know why, but people kept forcing her to refine elixirs, and there were all kinds of rare herbs. She was exhausted, but she couldn't bear to stop. In the end she was so tired. Then Chang Wanzhou, Qinile, and Old Four appeared one after another. Chu Luiyue sharply realized that although they seemed to have gone through a lot of torture, everyone's strength was much stronger than before. It should be because of Debao and the others, right? Chu Luiyue's heart warmed slightly. Let's talk when we get back. Let's go back to Xiling first. They didn't have any objections. Qini said, since we're also going back to Xiling, let's go together. Chu Luiyue glanced at him and nodded lightly. Okay. Thus, they decided to go back together just like that. Mu Hongyu said, I remember that we still have to go through a few transportation arrays when we get back. Before he could finish his words, a blue barrier enveloped them all. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. This should be Debao's doing. At this moment, Debao's voice rang in her ears. Go back and do what you want to do. Even though his voice was as tender as a baby's, it sounded calm and steady to Chu Luiyue's ears, and it was filled with a calming power. Chu Luiyue's heart seemed to have an additional layer of confidence. She bowed in the direction of the Red Moon Desert and said seriously, Thank you, seniors. Then the blue barrier flickered. Their figures instantly disappeared from where they were. Xiling. The streets were decorated with lanterns and colored banners, and there was a hubbub of voices. Because the third princess's wedding was in 3 days, it was also the day she ascended the throne. Thus, the entire Xiling celebration lasted for 10 days, from 3 days before the wedding to 7 days after the wedding. At the Jiang residence, the lanterns were lit. Hearing the bustling sounds outside, Jiang Yuqing's heart skipped a beat. Let's go out for a walk. Digression. At 6 p.m. mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from AI Network. He thought for a while but couldn't come up with anything, so he gave up. And? After Jiang Yuqing walked out, he casually found a secluded corner and changed into a mask. When he walked out, he became another ordinary-looking young master. The streets were very lively. Although many sects were still shrouded in the shadow of their disciples' disappearance, for most people in Xiling City, this matter had nothing to do with them. The third princess wedding gave them a lot of benefits. They couldn't be more happy. Why would they care about anything else? Jiang Yuqing walked alone on the street. At this moment, no one recognized his identity. They all treated him as an ordinary person. They didn't even look at him. Jiang Yuqing walked aimlessly. The scene in front of him was so similar to 2 years ago. However, his mood was completely different. He remembered the discussion of the servants just now and laughed at himself. It was indeed different. At that time he did his best to prepare everything and wanted everything to be perfect. But now he didn't have the energy. Even listening to a few more words made him feel tired. If it weren't for those people reminding him, he would have even forgotten about the reward. But in fact, this was originally because he was happy in his heart that he took the initiative to do so. If it weren't for the fact that he was worried about xuanhuan's face, he really wouldn't have bothered to do this. The people around him were all happy and lively. Only he was like an outsider who didn't fit in. Even if he was the one who was really going to get married, he didn't feel much until now. Jiang Yuqing walked to a restaurant, casually went up to the second floor and ordered some wine for himself. The wine was refreshing and burning as it went down his throat. What lingered in his mind was everything related to that person. Jiang Yuqing was a little irritated. He wanted to get rid of all these, so he drank one cup after another. However, the more he drank, the hotter the wine became, and the more he drank, the more sober he became. Scenes played out in his mind, becoming more and more vivid. Her laughter, her crying, her joy, her grief. He thought that as long as he did what he should do and became the best among these people, he would be her best choice. But he didn't expect that everything was just his wishful thinking. In the end, he found out that the person he thought was always high and mighty and that he could only look up to turned out to have eyes full of starlight because of someone. After that, everything that happened to her had nothing to do with him. Even the wedding that he had prepared with all his heart was nothing more than a dream. She was smiling and her eyes were bright and clean. But soon she was engulfed by a ball of fire. In the end, only that pair of determined eyes were left. Jianghu suddenly woke up. He suddenly stood up. Chapter 844. The woman seemed to have sensed something and turned around. A beautiful face came into view. A trace of surprise flashed across her eyes. Then her red lips curled into a smile. You are... Jianghu suddenly paused. Although the woman in front of him looked like her, she wasn't her. Her eyes and brows were similar, but there were some differences. That person's eyes were always gentle and cunning. However, the woman in front of him had a pair of clear, jade-like eyes that were faintly cold. It wasn't her, it wasn't her. Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes and glanced at his hand that was suspended in midair. She raised her eyebrows. Although he was wearing a mask, she could still recognize Jianghu identity from his figure, footsteps, and voice. Could it be that Jianghu had mistaken her for Xuanhuan? She hadn't heard such a title in a long time. Diske, how disgusting. Why are you here? Jianghu stiffly retracted his hand. His fingers curled and his throat seemed to be blocked by something. It took him a lot of effort to ask this question. Seeing Jianghu shocked and disappointed expression, Chu Luiyue blinked and the smile on her lips deepened. Hearing that voice that seemed to be filled with longing and joy, those who didn't know would really think that he was deeply in love with her. And he actually questioned her in such a way. How ridiculous. Could it be that Jianghu still hoped to see her in Xuanhuan again? Wasn't he the one who forced her into a dead end? What right did he have to talk to her like that? Chu Luiyue's mind raced, but she didn't show it on her face. She smiled faintly and said, Young master, you must have mistaken me for someone else. I came with my friends. They went in to buy things. I was waiting for them here. In fact, they had just returned to West Hill an hour ago. Originally, she wanted to rush back to the Chongshu Pavilion first, but Mu Hongyu said that they were too embarrassed now. If they went back like this, everyone would be very worried. No matter what, they had to wash up first. In fact, it wasn't just Mu Hongyu. The others, including Chu Luiyue, all looked very miserable. After all, they had stayed in the Red Moon Desert for so long. The sky was filled with yellow sand and the sun was scorching hot. Their bodies were almost stinking. Chu Luiyue also didn't want to go back with a bruised nose and swollen face. After some discussion, they found a temporary inn and cleaned themselves up. As Chu Luiyue still had a small bruise on her forehead, Yiranran simply applied a thin layer of powder and dressed her up a little. Chu Luiyue rarely dressed up. Seeing how insistent Yiranran was, she let her be. In the middle, she remembered that she hadn't worn the peach blossom hairpin Rong Xiu gave her properly, so she took it out and used it. Originally, she wanted to go back properly. She didn't expect to meet Jianghu while waiting for Mu Hongyu and the others to buy things. What bad luck. Chu Luiyue sighed silently in her heart. His good mood instantly vanished without a trace. At this moment, Jianghu finally recovered from his shock. Chu Luiyue. Didn't she already? He suddenly opened his eyes wide and looked at Chu Luiyue in disbelief. You're still alive? Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and raised her chin slightly. She stared into Jianghu eyes and smiled faintly. Young master, you must be joking. I'm standing here perfectly fine. Of course I'm alive. Jianghu was in a daze for a moment. This expression, this appearance, it really did seem like that person was talking. The alcohol came back to him again and his head was a little swollen. He only looked at the woman in front of him and murmured in a low voice, It's good that you're alive. It's good that I really... At first he felt relieved. Then, as if he remembered something, his expression suddenly changed. No, the strong smell of alcohol wafted over. Chu Luiyue calmly took a step back, but her eyes were still fixed on him. Jianghu's reaction was really strange. Luyu. At this moment, Mu Hongyu's clear voice came from the side. Chu Luiyue turned her head and saw Mu Hongyu and Yiranran rushing over. The two of them were originally happy, but then they saw an unfamiliar young man standing next to them. The way he looked at Chu Luiyue was really strange. Mu Hongyu frowned and immediately walked forward. She pulled Chu Luiyue over and stood in front of Jiang Yuqing without batting an eyelid, blocking his line of sight. Luyu, who is this person? Mu Hongyu asked warily. Judging from the smell of alcohol on his body, could it be that he came over to hit on Luyu because she was pretty? At first glance, she could tell that he wasn't a good person. Chu Luiyue chuckled. I don't know him. He seems to have mistaken me for someone else. This finally made Jiang Yuqing sober up a little. He closed his eyes and only then did he remember that he was wearing another face. It was normal for them to be so vigilant. But fortunately this was the case. Otherwise it would really be, he stared at Chu Luiyue and turned to leave. Hey, what's wrong with this person? Mu Hongyu frowned even more. He didn't even apologize for recognizing the wrong person? He doesn't look like an ordinary person. Why is he so uncultured? Chu Luiyue held her wrist and shook his head lightly. Forget it. What's the point of being calculative with this kind of person? Where's little Zhou and the rest? Yi Ranran whispered. Big brother Qin and the others helped him. Big brother Qin and the others said that they would help him clean up. They should be out soon, right? Chu Luiyue facepalmed. The few men took longer than us. I really have to take my hat off to them. Thinking about little Zhou's cold face, Chu Luiyue felt a slight headache. I'm afraid only Qin Yi and the rest can suppress him. Yi Ranran looked around and sighed. Xiling hasn't been this lively for 2 years. Last time, speaking of this, her expression darkened. Mu Hongyu was about to ask when she suddenly thought of something and fell silent. It should be related to that princess, right? What a pity. Mu Hongyu muttered. She originally admired that empress concubine a lot. Now that I finally came to Xiling, that person was no longer around. Chu Luiyue smiled faintly and said meaningfully, what's there to regret? We're in time for the third princess and eldest young master Zhang's wedding this time. I'm sure it'll be very lively then. Digression. Faint from the heat. 38 degrees Celsius mobile user, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. It was only after Lei Laosi persuaded him and mentioned Her Highness that he was finally persuaded. This is what a normal young man looks like. He had long wanted to say that Chang Wanzhou's usual dirty and dusty appearance was really enough. Upon hearing that, Chang Wanzhou's fair face that seemed to be translucent instantly burned up. He turned his head away awkwardly, but the tips of his ears were already red. Chu Luiyue snickered in her heart. This child was like a hedgehog. He looked like he had thorns all over his body and wasn't easy to get close to, but his heart was actually very soft. Also, his skin was especially thin. A casual tease could easily make him blush. But, she raised her brows slightly and glanced at Lei Laosi. Could it be that this person found Chang Wanzhou to replace him because he couldn't show his real face to others? After all, he was indeed an elegant young master back then. But now he had to disguise himself as a burly man. Seeing that Chang Wanzhou was going to be cooked at this rate, Chu Luiyue finally spoke up out of kindness. Since everyone's here, let's go. Shifu and the rest should be anxious from waiting. As Chu Luiyue spoke, she looked at Qin Yi and Lei Laosi. Then we'll take our leave now. Qin Yi nodded lightly. Since we're already at Xiling, we won't send you off. Laosi and I will stay at the previous inn. If you need any help, feel free to look for us. Chu Luiyue replied firmly. Okay. After watching Chu Luiyue and the rest leave until they couldn't be seen, the smile on Lei Laosi's face gradually disappeared, and he glanced in a certain direction vigilantly. Big brother, that man just now, Qin Yi smiled. It's him. Lei Laosi's eyes were filled with anger. Pui. He's really shameless. Just now we were quite far away, so we didn't see the situation clearly. We only vaguely saw a man talking to Her Highness for a while before leaving. However, we couldn't be more familiar with that person's aura. Even if he turned into ashes, we would still be able to recognize him clearly. Who knows what he said to Her Highness? Then should we follow them and take a look? Lei Laosi lowered his voice and asked. Qin Yi thought for a moment and shook his head. No need. Why? Lei Laosi was a little confused. Qin Yi's eyes flickered. Naturally, it's because someone's already doing it. What? Lei Laosi was a little confused, but he seemed to have recalled something. Could it be Old Seven? Previously, Her Highness mentioned that Xianhuan came back with her. The two of them relied on a special yuan instrument to conceal their aura. Xianhuan seemed to have used Little Hachi's medicine. Even though Old Seven is good at this, there seems to be someone who's better than him. A meaningful smile appeared on Qin Yi's face. I didn't expect there to be such a huge change after 2 years. Lei Laosi was still in a daze. Big brother, do you mean that someone else is secretly following Jiang Yuqing? But other than Old Seven, who else could it be? Let's go. Old Seven probably doesn't know that we're back. As Qini spoke, he walked forward. Lei Laosi hurriedly followed. As he walked, he pondered in his heart. Could it be that other than us and Xihan, there are other people from the 13U who have already returned to Xiling? As Jiang Yuqing walked on the streets, his mind was in a mess. The previous scene seemed to be replaying in front of his eyes. She's not her. He rubbed his glabella and wanted to shake everything off his mind. But for some reason, the more he thought about it, the clearer it became. On the bustling streets, there were many people walking to and fro. That girl in red stood there quietly, looked back and smiled brightly. Chu Liuyue's face. For some reason, Jiang Yuqing felt a little anxious. He staggered and actually almost fell to the ground. Eldest young master. Sun Qi, who had been following in the dark, hurriedly went forward but was pushed away by Jiang Yuqing. Eldest young master, you, Sun Qi said worriedly. The number of times eldest young master gets drunk can be counted with one hand. It's not even time yet, so why? Jiang Yuqing closed his eyes. Back home. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 846. Chongshu Pavilion. Yuqi Song had just taken Qi Dai's pulse again. After this period of recuperation, although Qi Dai's body had not completely recovered, his condition had stabilized. Only his mind was still not very clear. Most of the day he was in a daze. In addition, he was already mute, so he could not say anything. Everyone in the Chongshu Pavilion did not understand why the pavilion master kept this person. However, seeing that the pavilion master's attitude was firm, they did not ask further. They only did their duty and did what they had to do. Yuqi Song took out a pill and fed it to Qi Dai. He lay on the bed and whimpered twice. A hint of struggle appeared in his eyes. Yuqi Song's heart skipped a beat. To have such a reaction meant that Qi Dai had started to improve. If everything went smoothly. Suddenly, he seemed to have sensed something and turned around to look outside the door. This aura, this fluctuation. Pavilion master, what's wrong? The two disciples beside him were confused. Yuqi Song quickly got up and hurriedly said, "Take care of Qi Dai." Then he hurriedly left. It was already night time. Most of the disciples in the Chongshu Pavilion had already gone back to rest. It was quiet all around. Yuqi Song quickly walked forward. Lu Jiao, who had just come out of the medicinal garden, happened to bump into Yuqi Song. Seeing the pavilion master in such a hurry, Lu Jiao felt strange. After bowing, he asked, "Pavilion master, are you going down the mountain? It's already so late." Yuqi Song did not stop walking. He could not suppress the joy and excitement in his heart. "No, I'm going to pick up Lu Yu and the others." Lu Jiao was stunned. "Who needs you to personally?" Suddenly, his eyes widened and he cried out in shock. "You mean little junior sister and the others are back?" Yuqi Song could not help but smile. "That's right, it's them." Hearing this affirmative answer, Lu Jiao let out an excited howl and immediately followed. Me. I'll go too." Before he finished speaking, he had already rushed out and headed straight for the mountain gate. In the blink of an eye, he had already run in front of Yuqi Song. Yuqi Song looked at his back and could not help but shake his head and laugh. There were very few people in the Chongshu Pavilion. For convenience and safety, everyone lived close to each other. Therefore, Lu Jiao's shout immediately attracted the attention of many people. People walked out of the pavilion master, their faces blank. What were the pavilion master and Lu Jiao doing so late at night? A disciple asked. "Pavilion master, this is junior sister, little junior brother. Ran. It's really you?" Lu Jiao's voice was very loud, and this shout was full of energy. It was difficult for everyone not to hear it even if they wanted to. After a short of song, of course. "What? Jiao of song of? Lu and the others? And they? Of that's? Did they really come back?" "Look!" Amidst the chaos, someone suddenly shouted. Everyone looked over and saw a few figures walking up the stairs. The person in front was Lu Jiao, who was laughing so hard. The few behind him, Chu Luiyue, Changwanzhou, Yi Ranran, everyone was dumbfounded. Although the pavilion master had always said that they would return safely, everyone in the pavilion was actually very worried. After all, it was the Dahuang swamp. What a dangerous place. They waited day and night, their hearts filled with anxiety. They did not expect them to return so suddenly. Lu Jiao couldn't help but whistle and laugh proudly. "Ha! What are you all waiting for? Hurry up and welcome junior sister and junior brother home." Only then did everyone come back to their senses. The shock on their faces gradually faded, leaving only joy and relief. Ran. Junior sister. Junior brother. Chu Luiyue and the others had just come up. Before they could greet everyone properly, they were immediately surrounded by their senior brothers and senior sisters. Ran, are you guys alright? Why are you only back now? Are you injured? Are you injured? What's the situation in the Dahuang swamp? Junior sister, tell us quickly. Chu Luiyue felt a headache coming on. His passion was like fire. For a moment he really couldn't bear it. Ran was a soft person. When she saw such a scene, her small round face flushed red and she couldn't say a single word. Xuanhuan was even more so. The cold air on his body was constantly emitting, and it was simply freezing people to death. Unfortunately, everyone was too excited at this moment and no one noticed this. Because he had changed his outfit, the senior brothers and senior sisters could not help but praise him. Junior brother is so good looking. It couldn't be helped. When people were too happy, it was indeed easy to ignore many things. Xuanhuan's face darkened even more, but his ears turned red again. The hand holding the sword was ready to move, but when he thought about how these people were actually happy that they had returned alive, he could not take a step forward. Thus, only Chu Luiyue was left who could barely hold the situation. Senior brothers and senior sisters, this is a long story. Let's go in and talk? Chu Luiyue was discussing with everyone. As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Jiao waved his arm and shouted, Junior sister said to go in and talk in detail. Everyone heard his words clearly. After a moment of silence, the atmosphere became even more lively. Everyone clustered around the few of them as they walked inside. Quick, bring junior sister and the others back to sit down and talk. Pour tea. I'll serve tea. Hey, have you guys eaten yet? Do you want some snacks first? Aya, don't squeeze junior sister and the others. Make way. Chapter 847. That night, the Chongshu Pavilion was lively for once. Everyone was excited and joyful. They surrounded Chu Luiyue and the others and looked at them from head to toe. Thus, Chu Luiyue decided to tell him everything that had happened. Of course, most of the details were picked out. While she was trapped underground, Mu Hongyu and Yi Ran filled in the details of what had happened outside. Everyone was filled with emotion after listening to the story. Lu Jiao couldn't help but say, "Why are you so late? No wonder you guys came back so late. So you actually encountered so many things. What exactly is going on in the Red Moon Desert? You've all suffered a lot, haven't you?" Of course, Chu Luiyue didn't expose Debao and the others. She only said that she didn't know what was going on. Yi Ran refuted in a low voice, "Actually, we didn't suffer much. Actually, we didn't suffer that much and our strength has increased a lot." Although they were tired at the time, when they thought about it later, they realized that they had benefited the most from it. In that case, it was indeed a great opportunity. Dahuang Swamp is unpredictable. Although it's full of danger, there are indeed many opportunities. You've all gained a lot from this trip. It wasn't a wasted trip. Elder Xiai said happily. It was already a happy thing that these people could return safely, but he didn't expect that their cultivation had increased by different degrees. This was a pleasant surprise. Chu Luiyue in particular had become a 6th-stage warrior. Such a cultivation speed was heaven-defying. In comparison, the people who had returned earlier had basically returned empty-handed. Some of them had even suffered extremely serious injuries. Everyone thought that the disciples of the Chongshu Pavilion had been wiped out this time, but who would have thought that they would be the ones who benefited the most in the end? If word of this got out, it would attract a lot of envy. The group chatted for a long time, wishing they could ask all the questions they could. When Chu Luiyue and the others were almost overwhelmed, Yuchi-song finally spoke up to help. "Alright, it's too late today. They've just returned, so let them rest first. If there's anything, we can talk about it later." Since the pavilion master had spoken, although everyone was reluctant, they still got up and left. However, seeing how excited they were, they might not be able to sleep peacefully when they returned. Everyone left one after another. Even Mu Hongyu and the others also dispersed. Only Chu Luiyue and Yuchi-song were left in the room. Chu Luiyue understood that his master had something to ask him. Sure enough, after everyone left, Yuchi-song looked at her and asked, "You said earlier that you plucked the dancing lotus?" Chu Luiyue nodded. Yuchi-song frowned slightly, a trace of doubt flashing in his eyes. "Then have you ever met a tall man in black?" Chu Luiyue's heart stirred. Could he be asking about the first master? Seeing her reaction, Yuchi-song already knew what was going on. It seemed that Chu Luiyue had also met that man. But at that time, that man clearly said that the flower belonged to his wife. Why did he allow Chu Liwei to pluck it? Didn't he stop you when you plucked the dancing lotus? Chu Liwei blinked and asked curiously, why would he stop me? In fact, it was the first master who urged her to pluck it. Seeing Yuchi Song's stunned face, Chu Liwei thought for a moment and said, actually, I know that person. You know him? Yuchi Song was even more shocked. Liwei actually knows such a strong and powerful person? Chu Liwei nodded. For some reason he helped me a lot. So, then do you know who he is? There was almost no such person in the Tianling dynasty. Chu Liwei shook her head. His background is mysterious. I don't know more about him. Yuchi Song was a little disappointed, but seeing that Chu Liwei really didn't seem to know, he didn't continue asking. Then he suddenly thought of something and said, oh right. By the way, the fact that you brought the dancing lotus back will probably be known by others very soon. As for the third princess, Chu Liwei's lips curled up. Master, are you worried that the third princess will ask me for the dancing lotus? Although it sounded nice, in reality, according to Xuanhuan's personality, there was a high chance that she would directly snatch it. The noble third princess went around asking for medicine in order to improve His Majesty's health. It didn't sound wrong. Yuchi Song wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end he nodded. The dancing lotus was such a precious treasure. Even the Tianling royal family didn't have it. It was obvious how precious it was. Anyone in the world who obtained it would probably treasure it. No one would be willing to let it be snatched away halfway. Moreover, Liu must have suffered a lot in Dahuang Swamp. His heart really ached. However, Chu Liwei didn't seem to be worried at all. She smiled faintly, and there seemed to be flowing light in her eyes. If she wants it, she can come and get it. The Chongshu pavilion was overjoyed and bustling with noise and excitement. However, some people in Xiling City weren't so happy. Jiang Yuqing walked all the way back. The slightly cold night wind blew, and the corner of his clothes fluttered. He originally thought that this would sober him up, but he quickly realized that it didn't. This was because his mind was still replaying the scene just now. That woman was wearing a red dress and her black hair was like the clouds. She was the only one who occupied his line of sight on the busy street. She looked back and smiled. She was beautiful, pure, and moving. Jiang Yuqing returned to his residence. He paused in the courtyard and walked towards the study. He entered the study alone, closed the door and windows, and then walked to the table and sat down. Chapter 848. It's nothing. Jiang Yuqing looked up, and his expression had already returned to normal. Why did you come at this time? Xuanhuan looked at him suspiciously. I saw that it seemed to be a painting just now. What kind of painting would make him so wary? There were almost no secrets between the two of us, and she had almost never seen Jiang Yuqing so nervous that he wanted to hide something. It must be a masterpiece for you to take it out and admire it in the middle of the night. Why don't you take it out and let me take a look? Asked Xuanhuan as she took a step forward. However, Jiang Yuqing's expression was very nonchalant. It's not a masterpiece. I just found it by accident. There's nothing to see. Xuanhuan couldn't maintain the smile on her face. It's just a painting. It would be fine if he openly took it out for me to see, but he didn't. There must be something wrong with him for him to hide it from me. Xuanhuan glanced at the spot where Jiang Yuqing put the item back. Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows. As if sensing that Jiang Yuqing wasn't in a good mood, Xuanhuan quickly retracted her gaze. I didn't come here today to quarrel with him. Thinking of the purpose of this trip, Xuanhuan's expression became much gentler. I came here secretly this time. Don't worry, no one will know. Everyone in this yard was Jiang Yuqing's confidant, so she wasn't worried that this matter would spread. She took a few steps forward. Actually, you drank? Xuanhuan's expression changed slightly. Previously she was quite far away so she didn't notice it. Now that she was standing closer, she then realized that Jiang Yuqing reeked of alcohol. Upon closer inspection, his eyes were slightly bloodshot, and there was a hint of blurriness in his eyes. He seemed to be a little drunk. Jiang Yuqing had always been very restrained. He would never drink excessively and he wouldn't let himself get drunk. What was going on? Yuqing, what exactly happened to you? She asked as she reached for him. Jiang Yuqing calmly avoided her hand. I'm fine. If you have anything to say, just say it. Xuanhuan's heart felt a little empty after her attack failed. She bit her lip. In fact, she had recently discovered that Jiang Yuqing was becoming more and more impatient and perfunctory towards her. However, although his attitude was distant as her fiancé, he had done everything that he should, so no one could find fault with him. This made Xuanhuan even more aggrieved. She couldn't find a place to vent her anger. She gritted her teeth and suppressed the dissatisfaction and resentment in her heart. I came here today to ask you for the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill. Jiang Yuqing frowned instantly. What did you say? Xuanhuan was in a difficult position. I also know that I shouldn't do this, but I'm only 1 step away from recovering my Yuan meridian. There are only 3 days left until the wedding, so I can't do anything else. Even if I forcefully try, I'll at most have a low-grade Daijing Yuan meridian. You want to use the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill to raise your Yuan meridian level? Jiang Yuqing interrupted her. Xuanhuan nodded. Originally she didn't think of this. It was only after that person reminded her that she suddenly realized that even if she forcefully recovered her Daijing Yuan meridian, it would be very difficult for her to successfully raise the Tianling scepter. The most convenient thing was naturally the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill. I know that you gave that item to Xiahou previously, and he definitely won't be willing to return it. However, I can use other things to exchange for it. As long as the item is lost. Jiang Yuqing's voice was very cold. Xuanhuan was suddenly stunned. What is lost? Jiang Yuqing enunciated every word clearly. The 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill has already been stolen by someone. Xuanhuan naturally didn't believe him. However, looking at Jiang Yuqing's expression, it didn't seem like he was faking it. She was secretly angry. When can you get it back? Jiang Yuqing lowered his eyes. I don't know. Then what should I do? Xuanhuan didn't have the patience to continue pretending. If I can't raise the Tianling scepter, that's your problem. Jiang Yuqing already smelled of alcohol, and his mind was in a mess, so his words weren't very polite. No matter what, you're the 3rd princess with the Tianling royal family's bloodline. This is something you should think about and solve yourself. He rubbed his brows in frustration. If it were Yu, she definitely wouldn't be troubled by such things. As soon as he finished speaking, the room instantly fell into dead silence. Xuanhuan felt like she was struck by lightning. She widened her eyes in disbelief and stared at Jiang Yuqing. What did you just say? Jiang Yuqing also realized that his words were wrong, and his voice softened. I was just saying casually. Don't take it to heart. You still have her in your heart, don't you? Xuanhuan suddenly grabbed his wrist, her eyes filled with deep resentment and jealousy. You also think that I'm inferior to her in every aspect, don't you? Jiang Yuqing controlled his temper. You're thinking too much. If it was really as you said, I wouldn't have done that back then. Thinking of the fire back then, Xuanhuan gritted her teeth and shook off Jiang Yuqing's hand. Jiang Yuqing, you better remember what you promised me. With that, she turned around and left angrily. Jiang Yuqing stopped her again. Wait, I asked you to go to His Majesty's place to take a look. How's the situation? Xuanhuan choked. Actually, she didn't take this matter to heart at all. She only went there once or twice and stayed there for a while before coming out. Jiang Yuqing warned. Don't you know how important His Majesty's sobriety is to us? Okay, I got it. I know what to do. Xuanhuan walked around him in annoyance and left quickly. After this commotion, Jiang Yuqing finally sobered up. He thought for a while, walked over, weighed the wooden box and thought for a while. Actually, there's really no need to keep this thing. He acted like he wanted to burn it, but after going back and forth a few times, he couldn't bear to and could only put it back. Knock knock. Knocking sounds were suddenly heard. Eldest young master, Lord Xiahou is here. Xiahou. Let him in. Jiang Yuqing sat down on the chair. Then Xiahou came in. He was wearing a black shirt which completely covered his body. In the dark, if one didn't look closely, one wouldn't be able to recognize him. Behind him, there was a person who was wrapped up tightly. Xiahou Tingan. Jiang Yuqing leaned against the chair and looked at the two of them coldly. It seems like Lord Xiahou is here to return the item? Upon hearing this, Xiahou was instantly embarrassed. He swallowed his saliva with much difficulty and immediately scolded Xiahou Tingan. Hurry and apologize to eldest young master. Xiahou Tingan knelt on the floor and seemed to be quite injured. Why, eldest young master, you don't have to say this. Jiang Yuqing didn't have much patience with him and went straight to the point. Return the item first. We'll talk about the rest later. Xiahou face turned pale. Eldest young master, that thing is gone. A better reading experience came from the Love Network. Chapter 849. This is what happened. Now, we don't even know where that item is, so we can't find it even if we want to. Xiahou fearfully recounted everything, and Xiahou Tingan kept kneeling on the floor, looking like he was admitting his mistake. It's all my fault for not teaching him well, which is why I allowed my unfilial son to do such a thing. He really deserves to die. But eldest young master, please spare his life on my account. Perhaps we can still identify that person. Xiahou Rong had never begged anyone so humbly before. Now for Xiahou Tingan he had completely thrown away his pride. Jiang Yuqing was enraged, and he almost laughed out of anger when he heard the last part. Officer Xiahou, do you know what you're saying? Xiahou Rong's voice suddenly stopped. Actually, he was also very perturbed in his heart. Not only did they lose a 9 clouds yuan recovery pill, but they might also attract a huge disaster. The other party's plan was so meticulous, and their actions were so decisive. They clearly came prepared. If they were exposed by someone, the consequences would be unimaginable. Xiahou Rong trembled and used his sleeves to wipe the sweat on his forehead. Actually, he didn't dare to tell Jiang Yuqing that someone might have heard what he said that day. If Jiang Yuqing knew about this, not only would he not be able to protect Xiahou Tingan, but even he might not be able to escape. Xiahou Rong argued. Eldest young master, I know that we're in the wrong, but apart from coming clean with you today, I also want to try to make up for our mistakes. Jiang Yuqing sneered and stared at him as if he had heard the biggest joke in the world. Make up for our mistakes? Why yes, eldest young master. Think about it. How many people in the world can arrange such a meticulous plan and specially steal the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill? Jiang Yuqing's expression changed. You mean, eldest young master, those people have probably secretly returned. Xuanhuan returned to the palace in anger and threw a huge tantrum in Huayang Palace. She wasn't sure which of Jiang Yuqing's words were true and which were false. However, if Jiang Yuqing had made up his mind and did not intend to give her the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill, then no matter how much trouble she made, it would be useless. Therefore, after losing her temper, Xuanhuan decided to forcefully restore her yuan meridian after much consideration. If she still had some expectations and longing for Jiang Yuqing before, then his words today had completely shattered her fantasies. Regardless of whether he said it intentionally or not, Xuanhuan was already unforgivable. After thinking about it, she still felt that it was better to rely on herself than on anyone else. Thus, after a long period of consideration, she finally decided to forcefully restore her yuan meridian. The next day, Chu Luiyue and the others personally sent Mu Hongyu back to Dragon Teeth Mountain. The news of their safe return from the Great Desolate Swamp quickly spread throughout the entire Western Tomb. For a time, everyone was discussing with different reactions. There were those who rejoiced and there were those who were jealous. Previously, everyone thought that they were dead. Now that they had suddenly appeared, how could they not be curious? At the same time, another piece of news spread to everyone's ears. Chu Luiyue had not only successfully contracted a divine beast in the Great Desolate Swamp, but he had also plucked a dancing lotus. No matter which one it was, it would cause countless people to be envious, jealous, and hateful. One had to know that in the entire Tianling dynasty, apart from the Taizu of the past, no one else had contracted a divine beast. And that dancing lotus was a supreme-grade medicinal herb that only bloomed once every 500 years. Previously, the third princess had led 1,000 black cavalry troops and several sect disciples to the Great Desolate Swamp for the blood of the divine beast and such treasures. In the end, not only did they not obtain anything, but they also suffered heavy casualties and returned in defeat. Now, compared to Chu Luiyue's situation, it was really too embarrassing. On the other side, Xuanhuan had finally completely restored her yuan meridian on the day before her wedding after 2 days of bitter cultivation. However, just as she had expected, her yuan meridian had just barely entered the level of the Daijing yuan meridian. Compared to ordinary people, this might be considered not bad. However, for her status it was far from enough. In Shilling City, there were many geniuses with the Daijing yuan meridian, and she was not even ranked among them. This made Xuanhuan very unhappy, but there was nothing she could do at the moment. After all, it was already very difficult to successfully restore her yuan meridian. Thinking of this, Xuanhuan secretly cursed in her heart. If Xuanhuan hadn't destroyed her yuan meridian back then, she wouldn't have fallen to such a state today. Thinking that tomorrow was the day of her wedding, Xuanhuan suppressed the resentment in her heart with great difficulty and planned to see if her father showed any signs of waking up. Xuanhuan brought Chani to Qingfeng Hall. However, on the way there, Xuanhuan realized that the atmosphere in the palace seemed a little off. She couldn't tell what the problem was, but she felt that the palace servants seemed to be looking at her differently than before, as if there was a deeper meaning behind their gazes. When she arrived outside Qingfeng Hall, just as she was about to step in, she heard whispers coming from inside. "Hey, have you guys heard? Chu Liwei is back. This sentence was like a clap of thunder that exploded in Xuanhuan's mind. She was momentarily dazed. Chu Liwei is back. How is this possible? Isn't she dead? When Chani heard this voice, she immediately wanted to go forward and reprimand her, but Xuanhuan pulled her back. The voices of the palace servants came one after another. Why haven't we heard? It's not just her. Even the disciples of the Chongshu Pavilion are all fine. What does this mean? The important thing is, she contracted with a divine beast. That's a divine beast. I heard that she even brought back the dancing lotus, the treasure that Her Highness the Third Princess was injured because of. Originally, everyone said that Chu Liwei was already dead, but who knew that Chu Liwei's fortuitous opportunity was simply heaven-defying? Isn't this a slap to Her Highness the Third Princess's face? She brought so many people and put on such a big show, but in the end she didn't get anything. Instead, she couldn't even compare to a little girl who was fighting alone. If I were the third princess, I would be so ashamed that I would dig a hole in the ground and hide in it. Chapter 850. Chani's expression darkened as she glanced at Xuanhuan. This servant will deal with these sluts right now. Xuanhuan raised her hand to stop her, then walked over. She turned around and stepped through the door, only to see the palace servants whispering to each other. What are you talking about? Xuanhuan asked darkly. This voice shocked the palace servants. When they saw that the person who came was Xuanhuan, their faces turned pale and they knelt down one after another. Your Highness, spare us. Your Highness, spare us. She must have heard what they said just now. You said that Chu Liwei is back? Xuanhuan asked softly. Although his tone was calm in the ears of the palace servants, it was extremely dangerous. No, we didn't. Slap. Chani stepped forward and gave the person who spoke a harsh slap to the face. Her Highness is asking you a question. Confess honestly. If you lie, I'll cut out your tongues. Chani had always been powerful, and everyone in the palace knew that she was vicious and merciless. They all feared her. Seeing her act up, they were even more worried. How could they dare to hide anything? Immediately they told him everything they knew. The more Xuanhuan listened, the colder her expression became. Where did you hear all this from? Yes, the palace is already abuzz with the news. We only heard it by accident. Your Highness, please understand. The palace servants also felt that they had been wronged. Right now it wasn't just the palace. Everyone in Xiling City was probably talking about this matter. Yet they were the ones who were caught. If the third princess really wanted to punish them, how could she do it? Xuanhuan's eyelids twitched. How could she not understand what they were implying? This also meant that everyone already knew about Chu Liwei's matters, but she knew nothing about it. She just happened to be in seclusion to repair her Yuan meridian. She didn't expect such a big thing to happen outside. Chani also realized that something was wrong and quickly apologized. Your Highness, it's all because of this servant's negligence. She had been guarding outside Huayang Hall all this time. She didn't even go out of the door. The people below were afraid of her. How could they take the initiative to tell her these things? Therefore, when everyone knew about this, Xuanhuan became the last person to know. Her expression changed a few times, then she turned around and left. Chani asked subconsciously. Your Highness, His Majesty, we've already arrived at Clear Wind Palace. Does His Highness not intend to go in and take a look? Xuanhuan smiled coldly. This consort has more important things to do. Go, invite Chu Liwei into the palace. Just ask her to treat Imperial Father. With the divine beast and the dancing lotus, since that Chu Liwei was so powerful, he naturally had to make good use of him. Xiling City. In a house on 6 Cloud Street, Chu Liwei was sitting by the window playing chess with himself. The white pieces were ferocious, but the black pieces had already quietly formed an encirclement. As long as he slashed down, he would be able to kill the white pieces. How boring. Chu Liwei muttered to herself. Playing chess with herself wasn't very interesting. If Rong Xiu was here, at this moment Chang Wanzhou walked in with ginger tea and replaced the old tea beside her that had already turned cold. Chu Liwei stopped and threw the black pieces back into the jar. She looked up and smiled. Little Zhou, aren't you too familiar with doing this? You even know when to change the tea. It wasn't good if it was too hot or too cold. When she was focused on playing chess, she would often neglect the time. However, she could always drink tea that tasted just right. All of this was naturally because of Little Zhou. She didn't know how that person with Little Zhou had tortured him back then. Little Zhou lowered his eyes slightly, his long eyelashes fluttering. These are all small matters. If I can't even do this well, then I'm too useless. He had already done these things many times and was very familiar with them. He could even do it with his eyes closed. Knock knock. Knocking sounds suddenly came from outside. Chu Luiyue raised her brows slightly. Invite them in. Chang Wanzhou didn't ask anything and just nodded before turning to open the door. With a creak, the door opened. Qin Yi and Lei Laosi were standing outside. Qin Yi smiled lightly. It seems like we didn't find the wrong place. It's indeed here. Chang Wanzhou's eyes flickered, and he immediately took a step back to invite the two of them in. Please, Qin Yi nodded and walked in with Lei Laosi. Lei Laosi looked around and couldn't help but mutter, "Isn't this Elder Song's residence? It seems like it has already become Her Highness's residence?" Qin Yi's lips curved up slightly, and something seemed to have flashed across his long and narrow eyes. Elder Song has always been a righteous person. Her Highness used to like coming to this place a lot. I heard that Yuqi Song sold a lot of things when he was in trouble, but he didn't touch this residence in the end. After going through so much trouble, it finally became Her Highness's. It's considered fate. Chang Wanzhou followed behind the two of them and frowned slightly. In the 2 days since they returned to Xiling, Chu Luiyue basically spent the rest of her time here other than the first night at Chongshu Pavilion. Over here, she basically played chess and read books, looking very relaxed as if she didn't know that the people outside were talking about her. In just one night, such shocking news spread throughout the entire Xiling. No one would believe that there wasn't a mastermind behind it. However, very few people knew that the mastermind was actually Chu Luiyue herself. Today, Qin Yi and Lei Laosi even directly came to visit her. Logically speaking, it should be their first time here, but they looked very familiar with this place. The two of them clearly knew where to go and what to put there, so they didn't need Chang Wanzhou to lead the way. Chang Wanzhou pressed his lips against each other. Previously, he had already vaguely sensed that the two of them should have known Chu Luiyue for a long time. In fact, the two of them had always been very respectful to her. Normal people might not be able to tell, but Chang Wanzhou was extremely sensitive in this aspect, so he could see it very clearly. No matter if it was Qin Yi or Lei Laosi, they were both very strong. Chu Luiyue was much weaker than them, so logically speaking, they shouldn't have such an attitude toward Chu Luiyue. Not to mention, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant that they spent so much effort to guard had formed an agreement with Chu Luiyue after it broke through. All of this pointed to a shocking answer. Chang Wanzhou knew that there must be a huge secret behind it. The few of them walked in and quickly reached the front hall where Chu Luiyue was. Upon hearing the commotion, Chu Luiyue looked up and smiled at the two of them. "You guys came at the right time. I was just about to look for you guys." Qin Yi glanced at the half-finished chessboard on the table and smiled. Her Highness really likes to joke like before. She's clearly waiting for us to come. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly as she looked at Chang Wanzhou, who was about to go out. "Little Zhou, come in and talk too." Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios mobile users, please browse and read. Chapter 851. The remaining 3 people were stunned. "What do you mean? I'll just stand guard outside." Chang Wanzhou glanced at Qin Yi and Lei Laosi as he spoke with pursed lips. Chu Luiyue smiled but was very insistent. "It's okay. Even if Qin Yi is in the room, he can still monitor the entire courtyard." Qin Yi raised his brows. Chang Wanzhou hesitated for a moment before finally following him in. Lei Laosi glanced at Chang Wanzhou, then at Chu Luiyue. In the end, he couldn't help but look at his eldest brother for help. "Is Her Highness not planning to avoid this fellow?" "Qin Yi, sorry to trouble you," said Chu Luiyue. Qin Yi raised his hand, and a wooden cicada appeared in his palm. The wooden cicada's workmanship was extremely exquisite and lifelike. He raised his wrist and the wooden cicada flew out. "If there's any movement within a radius of 2.5 kilometers, it will immediately discover it," explained Qin Yi. Explained Qin Yi. Then he set up a green barrier in the room, isolating their voices from the outside world. Chu Luiyue smiled. "I've always been assured when you do things." Qin Yi's expression became serious, and a faint smile appeared on his picturesque face. This made his originally apathetic expression suddenly become lively. Then he bowed respectfully toward Chu Luiyue. "Qin Yi will naturally do my best for your highness." Chang Wanzhou, who had just walked to Chu Luiyue's side, narrowed his eyes. "Your highness, how many people in the world can use this form of address? Furthermore, this came from a top elite like Qin Yi." Chu Luiyue actually had mixed feelings when he heard this form of address again. "Nanny Ling Si, it's been hard on you these 2 years." Qin Yi's expression changed slightly. Lei Laosi's eyes actually turned red for a moment. "If your highness can return safely, we won't have to suffer." We'll follow your highness until death. With your highness's words, these 2 years of bitter waiting and suffering weren't in vain. Xuanhuan looked down. As expected, their names and identities were all different. And to be able to make such an expert follow him to the death. Chu Liyue's identity was obviously not ordinary. She's definitely not just a lady from a small country Yao Chen. Xuanhuan vaguely felt that a curtain was slowly opening in front of him. Once that curtain was opened, it would definitely cause everyone to be extremely shocked. This was only the tip of the iceberg. Qin, Your Highness, we've all changed our identities. For safety's sake, please call us by our current names. Chu Liyue thought for a moment, then nodded and sighed. If I hadn't trusted the scoundrel so easily back then, I wouldn't have ended up like this today. You guys wouldn't even be able to use your original names and you almost— The 13 you guards were all great. Any one of them would be an elite among elites. They were willing to follow her. She didn't know how much they had suffered, but they were still loyal to her. But in the end, they only had the bad reputation of betraying their master. They could only run away and wander around, suffering between life and death day and night. Even now they had to change their identities when they returned to Xiling. They couldn't even use their real names. Your Highness, you don't have to blame yourself. You've been extremely benevolent to them. They only did this because they were too greedy and despicable. If you want to talk about hatred, you should hate those people who betrayed you back then. Big Brother is right. Your Highness, how did you treat them back then? In the end, once Lei Laosi thought about what happened back then, he became agitated. Even though 2 years had already passed, the scene back then was still as clear as yesterday. These people should be hacked into pieces. At this moment, Qin suddenly looked outside and smiled. Someone's here. A figure silently appeared outside the door. It was Xianhuan. Big Brother, it's indeed you guys. Xianhuan heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the few people in the room. When he was outside just now, he vaguely felt that it was Big Brother's doing. Now that he came in to take a look, it was indeed so. Chu Liyue curved her eyes. Xianhuan, you even brought someone here? As she spoke, she looked behind Xianhuan. A figure suddenly jumped out. Your Highness, can't you pretend that you didn't see me? That was a young man who looked no more than 12 or 13 years old. His face still had some childishness, but he also vaguely had the aura of a young man. His pair of round eyes were very lively, and when he smiled, his eyes curved into crescents. Chu Liyue was a little shocked. Little 13, you've actually grown so tall already? I remember that I was still a little boy before. Little 13 wrinkled his nose. You haven't seen me for 2 years, so I naturally grew up quite a bit. Children at this age always hoped that they would grow up quickly and even like to pretend to be very mature. However, between his words and actions, there was always a hint of childishness, which made people not know whether to laugh or cry. Speaking of this, he quickened his pace and stopped in front of Chu Liyue before he asked her curiously. He asked curiously, "But Your Highness, why do you look different from before?" Based on the aura, it was indeed Her Highness. But this appearance, 13? Xianhuan called out to him in warning. 13 immediately shuddered and covered his mouth. Oh no. Previously, 7th brother said that after he came, he must not speak carelessly. However, he was too happy to see Her Highness and forgot for a moment. Xianhuan, why are you shouting at him? Chu Liyue glanced at Xianhuan and waved at 13. 13, don't be afraid. 13 hurriedly ran over and hid beside Chu Liyue. He stuck his tongue out at Xianhuan, proud and happy. Chapter 853. Chu Liyue followed Chani into the palace. In Huayang Palace, Xuanhuan was already impatient from waiting. She paced back and forth impatiently. The words she heard just now kept echoing in her ears. She originally thought that Chu Liyue was completely dead. She didn't expect him to come back alive. Moreover, he even made a contract with a mythical beast and even obtained the dancing lotus. It was fine if Chu Liyue was lucky enough to stumble upon the legendary fiend's matter by chance. But what was the deal with the dancing lotus? She still clearly remembered that when Elder Qiushi tried to obtain the dancing lotus, he was directly swallowed into the mirror lake. He didn't even have the chance to struggle and scream before he completely disappeared. Later on, xianxia and the others also returned empty-handed. How did Chu Liyue do it? The more Xuanhuan thought about it, the more annoyed she became. This feeling of being easily beaten by others was too familiar. In the past, when Xuanhuan was still alive, he always suppressed her like this. No matter how hard she tried, how attentive, and how she tried to please him, no one would spare her a second glance. In their eyes and hearts, there was only Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan thought about what happened back then and gritted her teeth in hatred. One Xuanhuan Yu was enough. Now, there was actually another Chu Luiyue. She raised her hand and touched her face. As long as she finished what she had to do, there was no need to keep Chu Luiyue. Because the next day was the day of the wedding, the palace was already decorated. Along the way there were lanterns and colored banners and it was very lively. As Chu Luiyue walked in, she nonchalantly sized up the place. She could tell that Xuanhuan was probably carrying out the ceremony according to the princess etiquette. Naturally, it couldn't be compared to her wedding back then. Although Xuanhuan was bold, she didn't dare to step on her head so openly. However, these things for the wedding seemed to be newly made. She guessed that Xuanhuan wouldn't be willing to use what she had left behind. However, Xuanhuan definitely felt aggrieved that she had lost in this scale. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up. Soon the two of them arrived at Huayang Palace. Chani went forward and knocked on the door. Xuanhuan's voice quickly came from inside. Then Chani walked out and invited Chu Luiyue in. With a smile on her face, Chu Luiyue agreed and walked in. Inside the room, Xuanhuan was waiting. The moment she saw Chu Luiyue's and saw Chu Luiyue's eyes. When she saw that familiar face's face, S's frowned subconsciously. Ansti, S's, the palace, third princess, how have you been? Chu Luiyue stopped 5 steps away from Xuanhuan and said with a smile. She didn't bow, nor was there any trace of humility on her face. It was as if she didn't place Xuanhuan in her eyes at all. This made Xuanhuan even more furious. She couldn't help but sneer. What? You've forgotten your etiquette after coming back from the great desolate swamp? Why aren't you bowing when you see this princess? Chu Luiyue raised her brows slightly as if she had heard a joke. She laughed lightly. She said with a chuckle, Third princess, have you ever seen anyone in this world bow respectfully when they see someone who almost killed them? I still remember all the things you did to me in the mystic forest. Xuanhuan choked. The situation back then was extremely dangerous. She was indeed partly responsible for Chu Luiyue's fall. There was no way she could deny this no matter what. Xuanhuan's face turned cold. What? Are you here to settle accounts with this princess today? That's strange. Didn't you invite me here, third princess? Chu Luiyue walked to a nearby chair very naturally and sat down leisurely. She rested her chin on one hand and said, Even if I'm looking for trouble, shouldn't you be the one looking for me? Seeing Chu Luiyue's impudence, Xuanhuan's face turned red with anger. How dare you? This is Huayang Palace. How dare you act so presumptuously? Chu Luiyue raised her eyes and looked at her coldly. She sneered in her heart. Speaking of which, Xuanhuan was only able to find a place to stay in Huayang Palace because of her help and pleading with Imperial Father. Now, did she think that she was the rightful owner of this place? Ridiculous. You know very well why the third princess has asked me to come here. Could it be that third princess wants me to be deeply grateful to you at this very moment? If third princess doesn't like me, you can call people in right now and take me away for punishment. Wouldn't that be enough? Chu Luiyue spoke very impolitely. She didn't put Xuanhuan in her eyes at all. Xuanhuan angrily pointed at Chu Luiyue. Her face was green and white. You dare to threaten this princess. In the past 2 years, almost no one had dared to speak to her in such a tone. Chu Luiyue leaned lazily on the chair and looked at Xuanhuan with half-narrowed eyes. There was a hint of ridicule in her dark jade-like eyes. So what? So what? She had made up her mind that Xuanhuan definitely wouldn't dare to call people in at this time. Unless she wanted to make a big scene and lose face on the day before the big wedding. As expected, Xuanhuan looked at Chu Luiyue angrily for a long time. In the end, she swallowed the rest of her words. Since that's the case, this princess won't beat around the bush with you. This princess wants your divine beast's blood and the dancing lotus. Imperial Father is seriously ill and only by relying on these can he hope to wake up. Imperial Father is the son of heaven. This is what you should do and it's also your honor. Of course, this princess won't let you give these things away for free. Chapter 854. This consort will agree to your request. Xuanhuan could only agree in the end after much consideration. Chu Luiyue was extremely arrogant now that she had such a precious treasure in her hands. She would let her be smug for now. Once this matter was over, she would settle the old and new grudges together. Chu Luiyue smiled. Third princess, wouldn't it have been fine if you had agreed earlier? After all, His Majesty's health is more important. Don't you think so? Xuanhuan choked. She only felt that the Chu Luiyue in front of her was truly an eyesore. Her expression was cold as she lowered her voice. You'd best behave yourself. Otherwise, this consort has plenty of ways to deal with you. Chu Luiyue shrugged nonchalantly as she chuckled. Xuanhuan then walked out first. Chani hurriedly bowed as she secretly glanced at the two of them. The anger on the third princess's face had yet to dissipate, while Chu Luiyue had a relaxed expression. It seemed like the conversation hadn't gone very smoothly. Go invite Zuomingxi over. Xuanhuan ordered coldly. Yes. Chani didn't dare to ask any more questions and immediately sent someone to do so. Xuanhuan turned to look at Chu Luiyue. You come with this consort to Clear Wind Hall. This wasn't the first time Chu Luiyue had entered the palace after her rebirth, but it was her first time coming to Clear Wind Hall. She had tried to come here before, but this place was heavily guarded and wasn't easy to approach, so she didn't act rashly. It could be seen that Xuanhuan placed great importance on Clear Wind Hall. Chu Luiyue knew very well that this definitely wasn't just because Imperial Father was here. She wanted Imperial Father to properly recuperate. There had to be some other reason for this place to be so heavily guarded that even the other members of the Imperial family found it difficult to enter. When the people of Clear Wind Hall saw that Xuanhuan had actually brought Chu Luiyue along, they were all shocked. When they heard that Xuanhuan wanted to let Chu Luiyue into the room to visit His Majesty, many people were even more shocked. It should be noted that on normal days, apart from the 3 celestial physicians on duty, only the third princess and eldest young master Jiang could freely enter this place. Chu Luiyue was actually allowed to enter, which was really shocking. However, when everyone thought about it, Chu Luiyue had a divine beast and a dancing lotus. It seemed to make sense for the third princess to invite her. Xuanhuan did not directly take Chu Luiyue in. Instead, she waited in the pavilion next to them, waiting for Zuomingxi to come. All sorts of gazes landed on Chu Luiyue. However, Chu Luiyue was already used to this and did not take it to heart at all. From the beginning to the end, he always had a demure and gentle appearance. Her words and actions were completely like that of a noble lady carefully nurtured by an aristocratic family. She was very generous and appropriate. It was very different from the aggressive appearance he had in the Huayang Palace. Vaguely, one could also hear the discussions of the servants. So that's Chu Luiyue. I've always heard of her, but today is the first time I've seen her. She really lives up to her reputation. Her charm and appearance are truly stunning. Coupled with her top-notch talent, it's really enviable. I heard that she came from an ordinary background, but now that she has contracted a divine beast and has such strength, the problem of her background is no longer a problem. Moreover, this imposing manner of hers really doesn't look like she came from a small family, especially that noble air between her eyebrows. Xuanhuan was also gritting her teeth as she watched from the side. The few times they had met before, Chu Luiyue was still very restrained. However, after returning from the mystic forest, it seemed that because he had something on her, he had become more and more unbridled. And now, in front of everyone, she had pretended to be a different person. It was really disgusting. Chu Luiyue didn't care about Xuanhuan's furious and jealous gaze. The main reason she came here today was to take a look at her father first. Even though Qihan previously said that her father's health had improved a lot, she still felt uneasy without seeing it with her own eyes. Thinking of how her father had been imprisoned in Qingfeng Palace for 2 years and couldn't even get out of bed, Chu Luiyue's heart ached. Just like that, about an hour later, Zuomingxi hurried over. There was actually another person who came with him. Jianghu. Your humble servant is late. I hope that Your Highness the Third Princess will forgive me. Zuomingxi took a few steps forward and immediately bowed. Xuanhuan didn't have much reaction when she saw him, but when she saw Jianghu, she knitted her brows. Yiqing, why are you here? Jianghu explained, Zuomingxi and I were in a similar situation. Previously, Officer Zhua and I happened to be together. When we heard the news from the palace, we were worried, so we decided to come together. Then his gaze turned slightly and it landed on Chu Luiyue. In actual fact, he originally didn't want to come, but after hearing from the palace servants that Xuanhuan had invited Chu Luiyue into the palace, he hesitated for a while and still followed. Ever since he hurriedly parted with her at the Lantern Festival that night, he hadn't seen her for the past few days. However, the scene from that day couldn't be erased from his mind. The more he thought about it, the more he wanted to see her again. Once this thought was born, it couldn't be erased. In addition, everyone in Xiling knew about the recent news of Chu Luiyue's legendary fiend bringing back the dancing lotus. Xuanhuan gradually came back to her senses. Her face was red and white and she was extremely embarrassed. Zuomingxi looked embarrassed and didn't know what to do. Jianghu came here with him. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. Chu Liwei calmly stood to the side with her eyebrows slightly raised. It seemed like she didn't care about this matter at all. She knew best what kind of person Jiang Yuqing was. In his heart, the most important person was always himself. When would such a selfish person care about other people? Xuanhuan should still like him. Otherwise, she wouldn't care so much about them meeting on the eve of the wedding. Unfortunately, Jiang Yuqing was too lazy to deal with her. Chu Liwei lowered her eyes and sneered in her heart. Now that things had turned out like this, who knew what kind of wonderful show would happen tomorrow? Xuanhuan clenched her teeth and suppressed the anger in her heart with great difficulty. You too, come with this consort to visit Imperial Father. After saying this, she took the lead and walked inside. Chu Liwei and Zuomingshi followed closely behind. Inside the Qingfeng Palace it was very quiet. White mist lingered above the incense cauldron and a faint fragrance of ambergris spread out. Chu Liwei wrinkled her nose. At that time Jian Fengqi had this smell on his body. She calmly looked inside. There was a person lying inside the golden muslin canopy. From here she could only see a blurry figure. But Chu Liwei could still recognize at a glance. That person was Imperial Father. The tip of her nose turned sour and the rims of her eyes turned hot. In an instant, it was as if there was a surge of heat in her heart, almost overturning her. Back then, when she was forced into a dead end, she finally chose to commit suicide without properly saying goodbye to Imperial Father. Now that they met again, she had already become a different person. When she thought of how he had been lying here for 2 years, the bitterness and anger in Chu Liu's heart almost burst out of her chest. She used a great deal of strength to restrain her urge to rush forward. Xuanhuan walked in front and had already reached the bedside. Lord Zhuo, come and take a look at Imperial Father's condition first. Zuomingshi walked forward. He lifted a corner of the muslin canopy and pulled His Majesty's hand out, leaving only his wrist exposed. Then he carefully took His Majesty's pulse. After a moment, he let go of His Majesty's hand. His Majesty's body hasn't fully recovered yet and is still unstable. If you want His Majesty to wake up, I'm afraid that he still needs to be nursed back to health. As he spoke, he glanced at Chu Liwei. If we can supplement it with the dancing lotus and the blood of mythical beasts, it would naturally be best. Everyone could guess why Xuanhuan had asked Chu Liwei to come over today. Therefore Zuomingshi simply said it directly. Xuanhuan asked. Then Lord Zhuo, are you confident that you can refine the pill for Imperial Father today? Zuomingshi chuckled. Your Highness may not know, but heavenly treasures like the blood of mythical beasts and the dancing lotus don't actually need to be refined into pills. You just need to boil some medicinal herbs together to make a decoction and take it directly. This will save you some time. Xuanhuan heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Chu Liwei. Young Miss Chu, please take the things out. Chu Liwei took a few steps forward and stood still 3 steps in front of the bed. From here she could vaguely make out the outline of that familiar face. At this moment, he seemed to be lying on the bed with his eyes tightly shut, as if he was unconscious. She said. It's my honor to be able to use these things in exchange for His Majesty's health. Xuanhuan frowned. For some reason she felt that Chu Liwei seemed to have some feelings for Imperial Father. She couldn't put her finger on it, but she felt that it was an eyesore. Perhaps it was because Imperial Father could achieve meteoric success with this merit after he regained consciousness? When she thought of this, Xuanhuan felt some disdain in her heart. Chu Liwei took out a rectangular wooden box. Xuanhuan and Zuomingshi's eyes lit up. Then Chu Liwei opened the wooden box. Click. A dancing lotus was lying quietly in the middle of it. 5 translucent pink and white petals were naturally closed. The stem was emerald green and full of vitality. It looked like it had just been plucked. Xuanhuan's throat was a little dry and greed flashed in her eyes. This was the real dancing lotus. Chu Liwei snapped her fingers and dumpling appeared on her shoulder. Xuanhuan looked up and saw the red-tailed phoenix intimately rubbing Chu Liu's cheek, looking obedient and lovable. She hated it in her heart. All the good things had become Chu Liu's. Chu Liu seemed to be unaware and tapped Dumpling's head. Tuanzi, can I borrow a drop of blood from you? Love Network provided a better reading experience. Chapter 856. Dumpling nodded. Then she gently pricked her other paw with her claws, and a drop of dark red blood immediately gushed out. Then the drop of blood slowly floated up. Chu Liwei reached out her hand, and the drop of blood quietly floated in the center of her palm. Upon closer inspection, it was faintly suffused with a layer of colorful light. A vast and mighty aura emanated from it. This was the divine beast blood of the red-tailed red phoenix. Xuanhuan and Mingxi both looked at the two items in Chu Liyue's hands with shock and anticipation. This was the only one in the entire Tianling dynasty. Many people might not be able to see it with their own eyes in their entire lives. However, it had appeared before their eyes just like that. Chu Liyue's card box, Mingxi. Master Zhuo, this should be enough, right? It's enough, it's enough. Mingxi came back to his senses and nodded repeatedly, unable to hide his excitement. As a celestial physician, he was already extremely happy to see such a rare treasure in the world. Now that he could personally boil it into a decoction, this was an even rarer opportunity. With these, I believe that Her Majesty's health will definitely improve as soon as possible. Chu Liyue nodded in satisfaction and handed over the wooden box and the drop of blood. Mingxi carefully took it. For safety's sake, he took out his own medicine cauldron and began refining. A ball of orange flame burned in the medicine cauldron. Mingxi threw in a few medicinal herbs one after another. When the refinement was almost complete, he cautiously threw in the dancing lotus. The clear and beautiful petals quickly curled up and then slowly melted, condensing into a snow-white water droplet. At first glance it looked like a small snowball. Finally, Mingxi put in Dumpling's blood. The two water droplets began to slowly merge. After about 15 minutes, all the medicinal herbs in the medicine cauldron had completely merged. Because they weren't refining pills, it didn't cause too much of a commotion. However, the ball of decoction floating in the medicine cauldron emitted a faint aura. He was not to be underestimated. Mingxi's body was almost drenched in sweat, and his lips were slightly pale. It could be seen that in this short period of time, he had consumed a lot of energy. Whether it was the divine beast's blood or the dancing lotus, they both contained extremely powerful energy. It was indeed not an easy task to harmonize the medicinal properties to the best possible level. In the end, Mingxi waved his sleeve and poured the medicine into a jade bowl. Xuanhuan stood at the side, staring at the bowl of medicinal soup, ready to make a move. If the decoction could be used on myself, not only would her strength be greatly improved, even the scars on her face might be completely healed. Thinking of this, the desire in her heart grew even stronger. Unfortunately, there was only one dancing lotus and he had used it all just now. But the blood of a mythical beast. Wasn't Chu Liyue's red-tailed red phoenix still there? Your Highness. Mingxi handed over the bowl of medicinal soup. Would you please feed it to His Majesty? Xuanhuan lowered her eyes to take a look, and only then did she regain her senses. She nodded and took the bowl. Taking a step forward, she lifted the muslin curtain and sat by the bed. Chu Liyue looked up, wanting to see Imperial Father's face. Unfortunately, Xuanhuan blocked her view, so she couldn't see clearly. Her heart trembled slightly, but she still withdrew her gaze, hiding the longing and worry in her eyes. With this medicine, Imperial Father's body should be able to improve greatly. The reason why she had purposely released the news and insisted on watching with her own eyes was to ensure that Imperial Father would be safe. Now she could finally relax a little. On the other side, after Xuanhuan fed a few mouthfuls of the medicine, she turned back to look at the two. This consort will take care of things here. You can leave first. Mingxi responded and was about to leave, but Chu Liyue said with a faint smile, Today, I don't have any urgent matters to attend to. Anyway, I don't have anything important to do today, so I'll just stay here and see how His Majesty is doing after taking the medicine. After all, it came from me. If I leave now and something happens in the future, I really won't be able to explain myself. Third Princess, don't you think so? Hearing this, Mingxi, who was just about to leave, stopped. That's right. He was the one who refined this medicine. What if something happened? Then this humble subject will also wait here? Mingxi said tentatively, then stood to the side. Xuanhuan was furious. She had originally wanted to send the two of them away so that she could take the remaining half of the medicine for herself. But now it seemed that she couldn't. Under the gazes of the two, Xuanhuan could only obediently feed the rest of the medicine to Imperial Father. Finally, she placed the empty bowl to the side and said indifferently, All right, the medicine is finished. All right, the medicine has been used up. Let Imperial Father rest first. Chu Liyue glanced at Imperial Father and vaguely saw that Imperial Father's complexion was much better. She felt slightly relieved. Since His Majesty has used the medicine, then if there's nothing else, I won't disturb you any longer. With that, she turned to leave. Wait. However, Xuanhuan suddenly spoke up and stopped her. This consort has something to discuss with you in a bit. Without waiting for Chu Liyue to reply, Xuanhuan glanced at Xuemingxi again. It's best if there's someone watching Imperial Father. I'll have to trouble Lord Zhou to stay here for a while. Xuemingxi hurriedly said. This humble subject will naturally do his best. Xuanhuan walked out. When she brushed past Chu Luiyue, she gave her a meaningful look. Follow this consort. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and followed. The two left Clear Wind Palace's main hall and arrived at a side hall. The moment they entered, Chani tactfully closed the door. Chu Luiyue turned to look at the closed door and smiled. Third Princess, what are you doing? Xuanhuan raised her chin slightly and ordered from above. This consort wants your divine beast's blood. Chu Luiyue had already guessed what she wanted to do, so she raised her brows without any shock. Third Princess should know that it's not an easy task to condense a divine beast's blood that contains the power of a bloodline, right? Dumpling already offered one earlier. If I give it to you now, I'm afraid that I'll suffer from a loss of blood. Xuanhuan sneered. Chu Luiyue, don't play dumb in front of this consort. Back when this consort's face was scratched by this beast, this consort was already being especially merciful by not pursuing the matter of you and it. If you know what's good for you, you'd best obediently offer up the divine beast's blood right now. If it weren't for the fact that this red-tailed phoenix had already been contracted and couldn't change its master, she would definitely have snatched this divine beast as well. Chu Luiyue looked at her with her arms crossed and one hand lightly tapped her chin. Your words aren't without reason. After all, appearance is extremely important to any woman. Tomorrow is your wedding day. It's not good to have a face covered in scars. Besides, you can hide it for a while, but you can't hide it forever. Your true appearance will eventually be exposed for the world to see. Don't you think so? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 857. Xuanhuan's heart suddenly trembled. Chu Luiyue's words were like a sudden clap of thunder that exploded in her ears. She immediately felt guilty and looked at Chu Luiyue in bewilderment. Was there a hidden meaning behind his words? However, Chu Luiyue's eyes were curved and he didn't seem to be implying anything. Xuanhuan's heart felt like it was suffocating and she didn't know what to do. Just tell me, are you going to give me the mythical beast's blood or not? Chu Luiyue said with a smile. Third Princess wants it, so how can I not give it to her? Dumpling? She turned to look at Dumpling, who was nestled on her shoulder. It had already curled up into a ball and turned its head away, looking very disgusted. Not to mention that this blood was very precious to it. Even if it didn't want it, it wouldn't be willing to give it to Xuanhuan. Chu Luiyue coaxed it a little, and Dumpling reluctantly offered up another blood bead. Xuanhuan's eyes lit up. The blood bead hovered in the palm of her hand. Chu Luiyue said, Third Princess, it's not impossible for you to have it, but you have to take out something of equal value in exchange. Xuanhuan sneered disdainfully. At the end of the day, Chu Luiyue just wants something. What do you want? Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly. I'll tell you what I want tomorrow. I hope that Third Princess won't be stingy when the time comes. Xuanhuan frowned slightly. Tomorrow is my wedding day. I won't have time to deal with you then. Chu Luiyue's eyes seemed to flash. That's what I need to think about. Xuanhuan didn't care. She had a lot of things to do at the wedding tomorrow. A mere Chu Luiyue wouldn't even have the right to talk to her. She had nothing to worry about. This consort agrees. Chu Luiyue smiled and nodded. With a flick of his finger, the blood bead flew toward Xuanhuan. Since that's the case, I'll first wish Third Princess a smooth marriage and a blissful marriage with young Master Jiang. With that, Chu Luiyue did not stay any longer and turned around to leave. Xuanhuan hurriedly grabbed the blood bead and impatiently swallowed it. In an instant, it seemed as if a flame had ignited in his chest. Xuanhuan hurriedly took off the mask. An itchy and numb feeling came from the wound on her face. His entire body felt like it was surrounded by flames, scorching and painful. Xuanhuan clenched her teeth tightly, forcing herself to endure this torture. As long as his appearance could be restored to normal, this was nothing. Chu Luiyue left Clear Wind Hall, his footsteps light. Dumpling had already returned to her body. Not bad. Chu Luiyue praised in her heart. Dumpling flapped its wings with a proud look in its eyes. Chu Luiyue saw its reaction and couldn't help laughing. She turned around to take a look. From here she could only see the eaves of the hall. At this time, Xuanhuan should be impatiently swallowing the blood of the divine beast, right? She wondered if Xuanhuan would be satisfied with this small gift. After pausing for a moment, Chu Luiyue continued to walk forward. When she passed by a junction, Chu Luiyue turned and walked in another direction. The palace servant behind her hurriedly said, "Young Miss Chu, you can't go there." Chu Luiyue paused in her steps and then suddenly realized, "Look at me, I actually got the wrong direction." With that, she turned around and walked in another direction. The palace servant smiled apologetically. "You haven't entered the palace many times, so it's normal that you don't know the way. It's just that in the future you have to be more careful and don't go there casually." The news that Chu Luiyue had entered the palace to offer medicine and treat His Majesty had quietly spread in the palace. Everyone guessed that if there were no accidents, this person's identity would definitely be extraordinary in the future. Thus they scrambled to curry favor with her. Chu Luiyue smiled and asked seemingly unintentionally, "Oh? Why is that?" The palace servant looked conflicted, but in the end he lowered his voice and whispered, "That's the Imperial Ancestral Hall. It was burned down 2 years ago and has just been repaired. Ordinary people can't go there." Chu Luiyue nodded as if she understood. "I see. Thank you." The palace servant was flattered and repeatedly thanked her. On the way he talked about the various rules of the palace and some gossip. Chu Luiyue listened to one by one and gradually realized that Xuanhuan seemed to be very concerned about the burned ancestral hall. From a certain point of view, she was even stricter than guarding His Majesty. At that time she chose to go there. The ancestral hall should have been badly burned and no evidence was left. What was Xuanhuan afraid of? After leaving the palace, Jiang Yuqing went straight back to the Jiang mansion. But until now, the anger in his heart had not completely dissipated. When he thought of Xuanhuan's unreasonable and aggressive appearance, he felt a burst of irritation in his heart. What made him even more anxious was that when Chu Luiyue heard the two of them arguing, she was completely indifferent. She was like an outsider, calmly watching a play that had nothing to do with her. From beginning to end, she didn't look at him at all, and her expression didn't change at all. Jiang Yuqing pressed his chest. For some reason when he thought of this, his chest felt very tight. He closed his eyes as if he had suddenly made up his mind and said to Sun Qi, who was following behind him, "Go and ask Chu Luiyue to go to the zither room in Xuanli Garden." Sun Qi was stunned. "Eldest young master, you are? Tomorrow was the wedding with the third princess. What did eldest young master want to do by asking Chu Luiyue at this time?" Moreover, it was in the zither room in Thousand View Garden. Jiang Yuqing coldly glanced at him. Sun Qi immediately said, "Your subordinate will go right away. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 858. Not long after Chu Luiyue walked out of the palace, she met Sun Qi, who was looking for her. "Miss Chu, my eldest young master invites you to Xuanli Garden." Sun Qi's words were concise and polite. Chu Luiyue was suspicious. Why did Jiang Yuqing come to find her at this time? And to Xuanli Garden? Chu Luiyue smiled. "Eldest young master Jiang should be very busy today. Why do you have time to find me? Is there an urgent matter? Shouldn't Jiang Yuqing be preparing for tomorrow's matters the day before the wedding? Could it be that the matter of the guqin had been discovered?" Chu Luiyue quickly rejected this idea as soon as it flashed through her mind. Impossible. She did what she did that day very secretly and didn't leave any hidden dangers. Even after that, she never used the peach blossom mark on her wrist in front of anyone. Or could it be that her identity as Xianhu was exposed? That didn't seem very likely. These people didn't know about the transparent hellfire in the heavenly square cauldron. Moreover, no matter which of these two situations it was, Jiang Yuqing would definitely come to settle the score with her personally. He definitely wouldn't send Sun Qi over and be very polite. This subordinate doesn't know about this either. Sun Qi lowered his head slightly. "Please do me a favor, Miss Chu." Chu Luiyue didn't want to agree at first. She felt disgusted just by looking at Jiang Yuqing, not to mention such a special invitation. Thinking about it, she felt that something was wrong. She thought for a moment and nodded in the end. Okay. Time passed slowly. After a long period of suffering, the painful and itchy feeling on Xuanhuan's face finally disappeared. At this time she was drenched in sweat and looked like she was about to collapse. But after she woke up, the first thing she did was to rush to the bronze mirror next to her to look at her face. Her face was reflected in the bronze mirror. The wounds on her face that had been festering continuously before had already scabbed over. They formed a light pink scar. Although it still looked terrifying, it was much better than before. Xuanhuan was pleasantly surprised. She carefully touched her face. How long had it been since he had taken the divine beast's blood, and it was already so effective. If he were to use some other medicine later on, he would definitely be able to recover completely very quickly. The problem of her appearance had been tormenting her for a long time, and now she could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Ben Gong will definitely get better, Xuanhuan murmured in a low voice. The stubbornness in her eyes was frightening. Men. Chani, who had been waiting outside, immediately pushed open the door and entered. What orders does your highness have? She bowed respectfully and inadvertently raised her head to take a look. Immediately she was pleasantly surprised. Your highness, your face is much better now. Although Xuanhuan hated it when others saw her disfigured face, she was getting better. Besides, Chani was happy for her, so she didn't mind. I still need to recuperate. Go and prepare first, Ben Gong wants to bathe and change clothes. Chani hurriedly said, yes. I'll go right away. Just as she was about to leave, Xuanhuan suddenly called out to her, her lips moving before she asked hesitantly, what's wrong? She pursed her lips and asked hesitantly, did Yuqing come back? The smile on Chani's face instantly froze. Xuanhuan's heart suddenly turned cold. Your Highness, eldest young master didn't come back. Chani lowered her head and her voice became much softer. The room instantly fell into dead silence. Xuanhuan clenched her teeth, and deep resentment flashed across her eyes. In the past, the two of them rarely quarreled, but in the past few months, he had become increasingly impatient with her. Today he even embarrassed her in front of so many people. She originally thought that he would come back to coax her, but it had been so long and he didn't react at all. Your Highness, eldest young master might have been busy recently, so he couldn't hold it in and said such harsh words to you. Chani saw that her expression was off and hurriedly mediated. After all, eldest young master is also worried about his majesty. Besides, think about it. Tomorrow is the wedding, and eldest young master definitely hopes to live happily in the future. Yet you said such things. Xuanhuan's mood finally eased a little. After thinking for a moment, she glanced at the sky outside. Forget it. After I wash up, this consort will personally go find him. In the end, she still had him in her heart. She had already waited too long for tomorrow's wedding. She truly didn't want the two of them to fall out like this. At worst, she would just lower her head first. Jiang residence. It was already afternoon. Everyone in the Jiang residence had been busy the entire day, but the residence was still very lively. Everything was meticulously decorated, making it look very festive. Xuanhuan changed her clothes and quietly came over. Because she had often secretly gone to find Jiang Yuqing in the past, when Jiang Yuqing's people saw her coming, they would directly let her in and even help cover for her. However, when Xuanhuan successfully arrived at Jiang Yuqing's courtyard, she discovered that he wasn't in the residence. Calculating the time after he left the palace, he should have returned a long time ago. Then did he go somewhere else on the way? It's already at this time. Where else can he go? Xuanhuan was unhappy that she missed him. Just as she was planning to wait here, she suddenly remembered that Jiang Yuqing had hurriedly hidden a painting in the study that day. This was an opportunity for him to go and find out more. Hence, Xuanhuan planned to go to the study to take a look. But when she walked to the door, she was stopped by a few guards on duty. Your Highness, eldest young master has instructed that nobody can casually enter the study without his permission. Why don't you rest in the room at the side first? Upon hearing this, Xuanhuan chuckled. I'm getting married to Yuqing tomorrow. Can it be that I can't even enter this study? The guards looked at each other in dismay. They were also in a difficult position. Both parties were in a stalemate for a while before the few of them finally chose to let her in. After all, if Xuanhuan's status was higher, they couldn't afford to offend her even more. Previously, she had directly entered the study a few times, so it shouldn't be a problem. Xuanhuan then entered the study as she wished. Even though she didn't know everything here very well, she was rather familiar with it as she had been here quite a few times in the past. There were many books and paintings in the room and most of them were extremely valuable. But perhaps because he had quite a few good items, Jiang Yuqing didn't really care about these. There were many valuable items casually placed on the table and bookshelf. Xuanhuan was even more confused. According to Jiang Yuqing's judgment, what kind of painting could make him treasure it so much? She followed the scene she saw that day and walked to the side of the table. After searching for a while, she finally found the checkpoint and opened the secret compartment at the bottom. There was a wooden box lying quietly in the middle. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Yuan. Chapter 859. Xuanhuan's heart suddenly sped up and thumped loudly. She looked around vigilantly before carefully taking out the wooden box. Even Jiang Yuqing didn't know that Xuanhuan had already figured out some of the mechanisms in his study. However, she had never done such a thing before. She knew that once Jiang Yuqing found out, he would definitely fly into a rage. But this time she was really too curious. Xuanhuan carefully looked at the wooden box in her hand. This wooden box was made of agarwood and exuded a faint fragrance. The paint was smooth and the patterns were exquisite. It was very exquisite and luxurious. For some reason the lock on the box wasn't stuck. Xuanhuan thought that it was probably because he was in too much of a hurry to keep this thing that day and forgot to lock it. She held her breath and opened the wooden box. There was indeed a scroll of painting hidden inside. Xuanhuan didn't know why, but she was so nervous that her palms were sweating. She had a premonition in her heart that Jiang Yuqing's secret might really be hidden in this scroll of painting. Then she took out the painting. This thing seemed to be quite old. Whether it was the scroll or the drawing paper, they all looked a little old. However, it was well preserved. It was obvious that its owner treasured it. Xuanhuan didn't blink as she slowly unrolled the scroll of painting. When she saw the content clearly, Xuanhuan's eyes suddenly widened. In the painting was a woman dressed in palace attire. She was standing by the lake. She seemed to have heard something. She turned around and smiled sweetly. She had snow-white skin, cherry lips and bright eyes. Her attire set off her noble aura. However, this bright smile and the craftiness in her eyes made people's hearts beat faster. If she was originally as bright as the moon, cold and noble, then this smile instantly added a touch of smoke and fire. It made people feel as if they could reach out their hand and grab the moon from the sky. She was devastatingly beautiful and had a heavenly fragrance. That was probably it. However, what shocked Xuanhuan wasn't that Jiang Yuqing had collected such a woman's portrait, but that the woman in the portrait was Xuanhuan. It was the Xuanhuan who used to be so high and mighty that it seemed unreachable. But in the end, it chose to sever its desires and fall into the abyss of death. With a thud, the painting fell from Xuanhuan's hands. However, the woman in the painting was still smiling so beautifully. It was as if all the colors in the world had gathered on that one person. It was incomparable. In an instant, it was as if thunder had descended from the sky. Xuanhuan's mind went completely blank. Her hands trembled uncontrollably, and she felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. From the inside to the outside, from the top to the bottom, it was bone-chilling. She had always thought that she was special to Jiang Yuqing. But now she finally realized that she was actually worthless to Jiang Yuqing. She threw the painting on the table and covered her face with her hands. She cried and laughed at the same time as if she had gone crazy. Just a moment ago, she was still thinking of taking the initiative to repair their relationship. Even if she took the initiative to lower her head, it didn't matter. She was willing. As long as they could reconcile, as long as the wedding tomorrow could be held smoothly, as long as everything was fine in the future. Xuanhuan's chest seemed to be surging crazily. Then her face turned pale and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her aura quickly withered and she fell into a chair. The guard outside heard the commotion and knocked on the door worriedly. He lowered his voice and asked, "Your Highness, are you all right?" Xuanhuan's mind was in a mess. She was stunned for a moment, and her body stiffly put the painting back. Then she got up and walked outside asking word by word, "Now, where exactly is he?" Xianli Garden Music Room. When Chu Luiyue arrived, she saw Jiang Yuqing standing by the lake. He was dressed in a green robe and stood with his hands behind his back. He looked at the lake in a daze and no one knew what he was thinking. When he heard footsteps, he turned around. When he saw that it was Chu Luiyue, his gaze became much gentler. Chu Luiyue's eyes flickered and she walked over. "Eldest young master, why are you looking for me?" Jiang Yuqing looked at her, and there seemed to be an undercurrent in his eyes. After a moment he suddenly said, "I want to marry you. I want to marry you." Chapter 860. Chu Luiyue thought that she had misheard. "What?" Jiang Yuqing repeated. "I said, I want to marry you." It wasn't a want or a request, but a want. He seemed to be giving an order, not discussing it with anyone. It was a matter of course and self-righteous. Chu Luiyue widened her eyes slightly as she looked at Jiang Yuqing. His expression was serious and his eyes were clear. He didn't look like he was joking. This matter was so absurd that for a moment Chu Luiyue thought that Jiang Yuqing had gone crazy. "Eldest young master Jiang, do you know what you're saying?" Chu Luiyue was baffled. Was there something wrong with Jiang Yuqing's brain? The night before his wedding with Xuanhuan, he asked her to come here and even said that he wanted to marry her. "Of course I know what I'm doing." Jiang Yuqing seemed to have expected Chu Liyue's reaction and replied naturally. I've thought about it a lot these 2 days and I finally made up my mind. It wasn't easy for him to make this decision. Jiang Yuqing knew better than anyone what he should and shouldn't do now. He knew that from the first time he saw Chu Liyue smile at the Wanzheng competition, he had already developed some feelings for her. From then on, he purposely restrained himself and wanted to get rid of the thoughts he had about Chu Liyue. He thought that if he didn't meet or say anything, he would gradually forget about these things. But it was too difficult. In the mystic forest, she had already made him waver again when she saved him. In the end, what made him decide to do this was the meeting a few days ago. At that moment, he almost couldn't tell whether the person in front of him was Xuanhuan or Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue was very similar to her, but there were many differences. He had always known this. However, after that glance, a crazy idea suddenly appeared in his mind. If you can't tell, then so be it. Whether it was Xuanhuan or Chu Liyue, it was fine as long as this person was standing in front of him. That person was already dead, his soul extinguished, never to return. He had once planned to bury the past and never mention it again. However, after Chu Liyue appeared, he suddenly felt as if a certain part of his heart had been filled up. He had seen countless beauties of all shapes and sizes. But after so many years, there were only 2 people who could give him such a feeling. One was Xuanhuan, and then there was Chu Liyue. Fortunately, Chu Liyue came from a humble background and was not as high and mighty as that person, who was as high as the clouds and as unreachable as the sun. You just have to stay by my side. I can give you whatever you want, Jiang Yuqing said seriously. This was not a mirage of an alliance but an actual promise. Given his status, he indeed had the confidence to say such a thing. Seeing Jiang Yuqing's confident look, Chu Liyue was so angry that she laughed. Young Master Jiang, I'm afraid you don't remember some things clearly. Let me remind you. First, you're going to marry the 3rd princess tomorrow. If you do this, what will you do to the 3rd princess? Second, your status will change again tomorrow. From now on, you will be the 3rd princess's husband and her subject. I don't think I need to tell you how to write the word loyalty. Third, from the beginning to the end, you didn't seem to ask for my opinion. Isn't this a little too arbitrary? Chu Liyue raised her chin slightly, and her red lips curved into an extremely cold smile. Also, you really can't give me what I want. It was already evening. The sun was setting in the west, and the setting sun reflected the sky into a warm orange color. The night wind of early summer still carried a trace of heat. However, xuanhuan, who had rushed to Xianxia garden, felt her entire body turn cold. Many scenes flashed through her mind one after another. One moment, it was the comings and goings of Jiang Yuqing and Xuanhuan. The next moment, it was the face of despair in the imperial ancestral hall. The next moment, it was the painting that had been kept for 10 years in the study. She was filled with anger, but she didn't know how to vent it. She could only crazily surge in her chest, making her feel like she was about to explode. At this moment, she only had one thought in her mind: find Jiang Yuqing and ask him clearly. When the guards of Xianxia garden saw Xuanhuan, they were all shocked and hurriedly bowed. Greetings to the 3rd princess. What was she doing here at this time? Where's Jiang Yuqing? Xuanhuan asked coldly. Seeing that her expression was very ugly, the guard didn't dare to hide anything and immediately said, Eldest young master is in the zither room of Thousand View Garden. This subordinate will send someone to inform. Before he could finish his sentence, Xuanhuan had already rushed over. 3rd princess, the 2 guards wanted to stop her, but they didn't dare to. Although Xianxia garden had always been managed by Jiang Yuqing, it was still the territory of the Tianling imperial family. If Xuanhuan wanted to enter, who would dare to stop her? The 2 of them looked at each other and saw the doubt and uneasiness in each other's eyes. Could the 3rd princess be going to find trouble with eldest young master? Could it be that she's going to make a big scene? Xuanhuan didn't stop and kept walking forward. When she thought about how he was actually in that place right now, the hatred in her heart deepened. Of all places to go, he just had to come to the zither room. In the past, she thought that Jiang Yuqing was guarding this place strictly because she had harmed Xuanhuan. Now that she thought about it, he probably treasured the place she had stayed in before. She hurriedly walked over and saw the sparkling surface of the lake from afar. Just as she was about to go forward, she suddenly saw 2 people standing by the lake. One of them was dressed in green and stood with his hands behind his back. It was Jiang Yuqing. However, the person in front of him was dressed in a red dress, with long black hair and a beautiful face. Who else could it be but Chu Liyue? Why was she here? Xuanhuan was stunned for a moment. She felt that there was something wrong between the 2 of them, so she instinctively stopped and hid her figure. At this moment, Jiang Yuqing's voice sounded. Tomorrow's wedding is between me and Xuanhuan. You don't have to worry about whether I've let her down or not. In addition, even if she's the ruler and I'm the subject after tomorrow, it doesn't mean that I have to do everything according to her wishes. Finally, I think that marrying me will definitely bring you more benefits than disadvantages. There are countless women in the Tianling dynasty who want to cling to me, but they can't compare to you. Not you. Therefore, I only said what I said just now to you. If you insist, then I'll ask you again. I want to marry you. Are you willing? Xuanhuan suddenly covered her mouth. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and suddenly smiled. Her expression was originally cold, as if covered with a thin layer of ice, but her smile instantly bloomed like thousands of flowers. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on her snow-white face. She was beautiful and peerless, and her eyes were as bright as stars. I don't want to. She smiled. I have someone I like. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 861. Jiang Yuqing was suddenly stunned. How familiar was this scene? Once upon a time, that person was also like this. Here, she told him with a smile that her heart already belonged to someone else. The same place, the same words, the same smile. The only difference was that when that person said this to him in the past, he didn't even have time to express his feelings. But now he put down his attitude and sincerely asked Chu Luiyue to be with him, but he was also rejected. For a moment, Jiang Yuqing almost mixed up the two scenes. He couldn't tell whether the person in front of him was Chu Luiyue or Xuanhuan. Something suddenly surged from the bottom of his heart. He grabbed Chu Luiyue's wrist. That won't do. Chu Luiyue easily dodged. Although Jiang Yuqing's cultivation level was higher than hers, after the experience in the Red Moon Desert, her movement technique had improved too much. It wasn't difficult to deal with Jiang Yuqing. Chu Luiyue took a step back and raised her eyebrows slightly. The smile on her face faded a little. Eldest young Master Jiang, please conduct yourself with dignity. The disgust and disdain that flashed through her eyes suddenly pierced Jiang Yuqing's heart like a steel needle. The resentment that had been suppressed for many years suddenly gushed out. It almost went to Jiang Yuqing's head. He almost blurted out angrily, I won't allow it. You can't like anyone else except me. Jiang Yuqing's sudden outburst surprised Chu Luiyue. In her impression, Jiang Yuqing rarely became so angry no matter what the situation was. Even when he was harming people, his expression was always calm and collected. Why did it seem like he had been provoked? Chu Luiyue became vigilant and took another step back. She frowned and said coldly, liking someone can't be forced. Jiang Yuqing, wake up. Jiang Yuqing's heart trembled for some reason when he saw her getting angry. He looked at the pair of black jade-like eyes that were filled with anger, and his expression changed. He opened his mouth, but his voice lowered again. Ayu, don't be angry. He murmured in a low voice as if he was begging her. He reached out his hand to pull her again. Chu Luiyue felt that Jiang Yuqing was really crazy. What was he doing? Ayu, who was he calling? A deep sense of disgust arose in her heart, and she turned around to leave. However, at this moment, a voice filled with anger and resentment came from the side. Jiang Yuqing. Chu Luiyue looked up. Ah, what a coincidence, the person who came was Xuanhuan. Just now, when she was arguing with Jiang Yuqing, she didn't notice that someone had come. From the looks of it, she must have heard a lot of things just now, right? However, no matter how much she heard, Jiang Yuqing's every word was like a sharp knife to her, ruthlessly stabbing into her heart. This sharp roar finally brought Jiang Yuqing back to his senses. He looked at his empty hand. Chu Luiyue stood to the side, far away from him. Her entire body was filled with disgust for him, as if looking at him any longer would dirty her eyes. He suddenly felt a sharp pain in his heart. It was like this in the past and it was still like this now. The emotions in his eyes quickly turned cold. He looked at Xuanhuan and asked coldly, Why are you here? Xuanhuan sneered. This consort is the third princess, and this Xuanli garden is an imperial garden. Why can't this consort come here? But you, Jiang Yuqing, we're getting married tomorrow, but what are you doing? You're actually asking to marry another woman? Jiang Yuqing, do you even have a heart? Only she knew how much her heart hurt when she heard those words just now. She thought that her heart had already become numb after seeing that portrait. However, when she came here and heard how he treated Chu Luiyue, she realized that it could be even more painful. It was as if someone had grabbed her heart, pulled it out, threw it on the ice and ruthlessly trampled on it. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Jiang Yuqing frowned as he looked at the hysterical Xuanhuan. He had already sent away the nearby guards in advance. He originally wanted to have a good talk with Chu Luiyue, but he didn't expect that Xuanhuan would barge in and make such a scene. Calm down. As a princess, what's the difference between you and a shrew if you make such a scene? Jiang Yuqing coldly reprimanded. These words completely ignited the anger in Xuanhuan's heart. Ah, shrew? You called me a shrew? Xuanhuan pointed at her own nose as if she had heard the funniest joke in the world. She shrieked, Jiang Yuqing, you betrayed me first. Then she fiercely pointed at Chu Luiyue next to her. What's so good about this slut that she's worth it for you to do this? She's just a lowly thing, but you actually treated me like this for her. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes dangerously. However, before she could do anything, Jiang Yuqing took the lead to speak coldly. Xuanhuan, watch your words. Don't forget your status. Xuanhuan suddenly laughed. Her facial features were distorted and her eyes were crazed. She slowly said, Jiang Yuqing, do you think I don't know what you like about her? Isn't it because she looks 50% similar to Xuanhuan? Jiang Yuqing's heart thumped. His voice was stern. What nonsense are you talking about? However, Xuanhuan turned a blind eye to his anger. Instead, she turned her head to look at Chu Luiyue with a mocking gaze. Chu Luiyue, do you think he's sincere to you? You're just a substitute. Your eyebrows and eyes are exactly the same as my short-lived elder sister, Xuanhuan. You can't forget that person. Now that he's looking for you, you're just a substitute. Xuanhuan. Jiang Yuqing felt that something was wrong. He quickly stepped forward, grabbed Xuanhuan's hand and was about to leave. Your brain is muddled. I'll take you to clear your head. Xuanhuan flung his hand away. Don't touch me. I'm very clear-headed. Her eyes were red and she looked embarrassed. She stared at Jiang Yuqing and sneered. Finally, she whispered, Jiang Yuqing, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid that she'll find out that you're just treating her as a substitute for Xuanhuan? Or are you afraid that people will find out that you're still obsessed with Xuanhuan even though you're getting married to me tomorrow? Or are you most afraid that people will find out that you've liked Xuanhuan for 10 years, but in the end you personally, slap? There was a loud slap in the face. Xuanhuan staggered and fell to the ground. Half of her face quickly turned red and swollen, and blood seeped out of the corner of her mouth. It was obvious how hard that slap was. Jiang Yuqing looked down at her with a murderous look in his eyes. Xuanhuan, you're crazy. Chu Luiyue stood at the side and watched this scene with a cold expression. It was as if she was watching a show that had nothing to do with her. Looking at the two hysterical people who were at each other's throats, she suddenly curled her lips and looked at them coldly. How laughable. The scene from 2 years ago was happening again. But this time, everyone's identities were reversed. The pain that they had inflicted on her in the past was slowly being exacted back on them. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 862. She hadn't done anything yet, but the two of them were already fighting among themselves. It was finally their turn to experience the bone-piercing pain of betrayal that she had experienced back then. Chu Luiyue tucked the loose strands of hair on her cheeks behind her ears, looking like she was ready to watch a good show. If it were anyone else, they would definitely want to leave immediately after seeing this scene. After all, the two people who were fighting were the Honorable Third Princess and Jiang Yuqing, who had the power to overturn the imperial court. Anyone who had anything to do with these two people would probably get into trouble. The more they knew, the more dangerous it would be. Chu Luiyue was different. These two were her old enemies. She couldn't be happier to see them causing such a ruckus. What was there to be afraid of? The ones who should be afraid were these two people. Jiang Yuqing's slap made Xuanhuan see stars before her eyes, and a strong smell of blood instantly surged up between her lips and teeth. But this time she finally regained some of her rationality. Chu Luiyue was still standing next to them. If she really revealed everything just now, the consequences would be unimaginable. Xuanhuan covered her face. Her heart was filled with lingering fear, and her eyes were filled with regret. Jiang Yuqing looked down at her condescendingly. In his heart he really wanted to kill her. Xuanhuan had always been impulsive, reckless, arrogant, and willful. In the past 2 years, her temper had become worse and worse. He had been enduring it all this time, but he didn't expect her to be brainless to this extent. If he hadn't stopped her in time, would she have loudly told everyone what they had done? Although Jiang Yuqing liked Chu Luiyue, he had never thought of telling her these things. Such a confidential matter involved many people. If they weren't careful, they would die. However, xuanhuan almost revealed everything. Guards, Jiang Yuqing ordered. 2 people immediately came out from the shadows and knelt on one knee. Greetings, young master. The 3rd princess is delirious for a moment and needs to rest in bed. Prepare a carriage immediately and accompany me to send the 3rd princess back to the palace. Yes. The 2 guards didn't dare to say anything and just followed Jiang Yuqing's instructions. xuanhuan wanted to say something, but Jiang Yuqing grabbed her wrist and pulled her up from the ground. She was a little scared and stepped back to hide. The look in Jiang Yuqing's eyes just now was too frightening. Moreover, when she thought about how Jiang Yuqing had been infatuated with Xuanhuan for 10 years and still couldn't forget her, she felt as if she had swallowed a fly. She felt extremely nauseous. Jiang Yuqing tightened his grip on her hand that was trying to break free. He gave her a warning look, but his tone was much gentler. Digression. At 6 o'clock, mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI. Net. Even eldest young master Jiang himself will have more say in the imperial court. There are many people in the world who want such a good thing. Exactly. Previously, he already had a lot of power in his hands, but he didn't have a suitable identity. As time passed, it was inevitable that people would criticize him. But as long as he marries the 3rd princess, won't all of this be natural? Isn't it all because the empress concubine suddenly passed away back then? There were many things that could only be urgently handed over to him to handle. In the end, after he took over, he was unwilling to return it. He endured until now and continued to do so. In the future, no one will be able to stop him from doing whatever he wants. Shh. Keep it down. Are you tired of living? If such words were heard, they wouldn't have a good ending. Fortunately, the streets were crowded and very noisy at this time. Apart from the people nearby, no one else could hear such discussions. Jiang Yuqing walked to the front of the snow-kicking black-headed colt, leaped and easily mounted the horse. Behind him, the ceremonial team had already finished their preparations. They carried mahogany chests filled with all kinds of treasures and lined them up one after another. There was almost no end in sight. Apart from the Jiang residents that prepared the betrothal gifts, no one could guess how rich the items inside were. Jiang Yuqing lightly kicked the horse's belly, and it immediately moved forward. Gongs and drums were beating on the streets and ceremonial music sounded. Jiang Yuqing led his people towards the imperial palace. The crowd surged along with him. From afar, the array was astonishing. Because today's wedding ceremony was a little special and was held in the Xuanhuan Palace in the imperial palace, all the important figures of the Tianling dynasty directly entered the palace and waited for Jiang Yuqing's arrival. Jiang Yuqing sat high on the horse. When he raised his head, he could see the heavy and majestic imperial palace. His expression was calm, and an undercurrent flashed through his eyes. He had imagined such a scene many times. In the end, after so many years, it finally came true. But standing at the end of this palace road, waiting for him behind the door, was already another person. But that was not important. What he had to do was to cross that door. As for who the person behind the door was, it was not important. On the other hand, the palace had been preparing since before dawn. The process of the ceremony was complicated and tedious, and there were many things to be used. Chani checked with the people sent by the Ministry of Rites over and over again, afraid that she would miss something. In the main hall of Huayang Palace, Xuanhuan also woke up early and began to let 2 experienced nannies help her dress and make up. Of course, she had already put on a mask in advance. Although the wounds on her face had improved a lot and were no longer festering, scabs of different depths still formed because of the scabs. If she wanted to completely remove them, it would probably take another month or so. Moreover, half of her cheek was red and swollen from Jiang Yuqing's slap, and it had yet to fade. The 2 nannies were both old people in the palace. They had once sent several princesses to their weddings and were very experienced. But when they came to Huayang Palace to help Xuanhuan dress and make up, the 2 of them simultaneously became nervous. Xuanhuan was still going to ascend to the throne today. They had served several princesses before, but this was the first time they had served someone of this status and standard. Everyone knew that everything at the ceremony had to be done carefully and cautiously. There could not be the slightest mistake. In the 1,000-year history of the Tianling dynasty, there had been empresses before, but there were not many. Originally, they had all thought that the crown princess would inherit the throne this time. They did not expect that something would happen later, and Her Majesty would fall into a coma. After going around in circles, this position actually fell into the hands of this previously unremarkable third princess, Xuanhuan. In addition, the two of them quickly discovered another problem. Xuanhuan did not seem to be in a very good mood. She sat there expressionlessly, and the cold aura around her almost froze the entire space in the room. This was strange. Today was her big day. It was her wedding and her ascension to the throne. It was already extremely difficult for the world to ask for one of them, let alone her having both. From today onwards, she was the most honorable person in the entire Tianling dynasty. From now on, millions of miles of territory belonged to her. What else could she be unhappy about? Let's not talk about this. Just Jiang Yuqing alone is the dream man of millions of women. Which woman in the world did not envy her? But they definitely did not dare to ask such a question. The two nannies helped Xuanhuan dress and change into the phoenix coronet and robes with trembling hands. After everything was done, Chan Yi's voice finally came from outside. The prince consort has entered the palace. A better reading experience came from the Love Network. Chapter 864. Upon hearing this, Xuanhuan's face, which had been as cold as ice, finally showed a trace of emotion. Was finally here. Your Highness, the prince consort is very handsome today. The palace maid who came to report the news said happily. However, the main hall was still silent after she finished speaking. Xuanhuan said calmly, I understand. This consort understands. You may leave. The palace maid was stunned. What was going on? Why did the third princess not seem happy at all after hearing this news? If it was an ordinary woman, shouldn't she be shy and happy when she heard that her husband was coming to marry her? But why did the third princess's expression seem as if she didn't care at all? The palace maid had wanted to say a few nice words to ask for a reward, but she ended up in such a situation. For a moment, she was at a loss and didn't know whether to advance or retreat. What are you still standing there for? Do what you should be doing. If there is even the slightest oversight, you will be held accountable. Chan Yi, who was waiting at the door, reprimanded in a low voice with a cold expression. The palace maid was startled and hurriedly agreed in a submissive manner. Why yes. With that, she retreated timidly. When she walked outside, she was still confused. Strange. The third princess and the prince consort had always been very loving. There was no reason for them to be like this on the wedding day. Could it be that the third princess was unhappy because she praised the prince consort? That was still possible. Thinking of this, the palace maid secretly scolded herself for being stupid. In the main hall, Xuanhuan looked at her reflection in the bronze mirror. Her injuries had been completely covered, and her exquisite makeup made her look even more beautiful than usual. Disregarding everything else, Xuanhuan was also one of the top beauties in Xiling City. Today she was dressed up splendidly, which made her even more beautiful. However, her eyes, which carried a trace of resentment, ruined the beauty of her face. She looked a little bitter and unkind. When a nanny saw this, she smiled and said fawningly, the third princess's eyes are really beautiful. The third princess is truly as beautiful as a painting. She's like a fairy. After so many years, this servant has served many masters, but you are really the most beautiful one. The other nanny also hurriedly echoed. Yes. If the prince consort sees you, he will definitely be shocked. Xuanhuan sneered in her heart. She slowly stroked the phoenix hairpin on her head and asked softly, What's the matter? Then how is this consort compared to eldest sister? Xuanhuan's elder sister was naturally only one person, the former princess Xuanhu. As soon as this was said, the two old maids were instantly stunned and embarrassed. Xuanhuan was indeed beautiful, but compared to that person she was still a far cry. Not to mention his facial features, just his aura was different from the rest. Xuanhuan was a worldly beauty, but the empress concubine's beauty was like the sun in the clouds, causing people to only admire her. Even if they looked at her more, they would feel that it was blasphemous. There was really no way to compare. One of the nannies reacted quickly and smiled. Today is His Highness' big day, so you are naturally the most beautiful. Xuanhuan didn't say anything, but her eyes were filled with sarcasm. She didn't need them to say anything. She also knew that her appearance couldn't compare to Xuanhu. In that painting, Xuanhu was only 14 years old, but she was already a rare beauty. It was no wonder that Jiang Yuqing had been thinking about her for 10 years. At this moment, the sound of ceremonial music suddenly came from outside. Everyone knew that it was the bridegroom's arrival. When the palace maid who had been reprimanded saw this, she hurriedly took 2 steps back and said excitedly, Your Highness, after the prince consort entered the palace, He immediately dismounted and couldn't wait to marry your highness. Actually, there was still some distance between the palace gates and Huayang Palace Hall. She said this to highlight Jiang Yuqing's love for Xuanhuan. As expected, even the two old maids echoed her words. It seems that the prince consort is deeply in love with your highness. He can't wait to welcome you back. Xuanhuan sneered in her heart when she heard this. Deeply in love? If they knew that Jiang Yuqing had fiercely slapped her yesterday, personally escorted her back, and even warned her for a long time, who knew if they would still be able to say such words? Xuanhuan lifted her wrist and covered her head with the red veil. The dragon and phoenix embroidered veil fell down, covering her eyes that were filled with mockery. Chani walked over and helped her out of Huayang Palace Hall. Jiang Yuqing had already arrived outside the hall with his men. Under the gazes of countless people, Jiang Yuqing walked up and stood in front of Xuanhuan, extending his hand. He said with a gentle expression, I've come to marry you. On the other side, everyone had already gathered in the plaza in front of Lang Kuan Palace Hall. This huge plaza was paved with white marble. At this moment, the officials of the imperial court were standing on the left side, while the important people of the various sects were standing on the right side. Apart from that, there were also black cavalry soldiers guarding in all directions. There was still a red carpet in the middle, and it extended all the way up, crossing the 9 steps and reaching the entrance of Lang Kuan Palace Hall. The reason why the wedding was held here and the coronation ceremony was because the Tianling scepter was enshrined in Lang Kuan Palace Hall. Everyone knew that this was the symbol of the Tianling Emperor's authority. If you have the guts, then say these words in front of the third princess. This old man wants to see how arrogant you can be after today. This is the way of the ruler and minister, do you understand? Meng Jingji disagreed and smiled coldly. This general has always been loyal to Tianling. Ruler? Not to mention that his majesty was still alive. Even if he had passed away, it was still unknown whether third princess Xuanhuan could raise the Tianling scepter. At this point, this small farce had finally subsided. However, the reactions of the surrounding people were different. Some were envious, some were happy, some were disdainful, and some were mocking. Although Meng Jingji was a bit suspicious of having an army for his own sake, what he said just now wasn't completely unreasonable. Jiang Yuqing was previously engaged to the empress concubine, and it was even time to hold the wedding. He didn't expect that something would happen to the empress concubine, and everything would change. Until now, it had actually been less than 2 years since the empress concubine's death. Jiang Yuqing and Xuanhuan's wedding really made people feel that it was inappropriate. However, not many people dared to say this. Now that Meng Jingji had caused a ruckus, the atmosphere immediately became very awkward. The surrounding space seemed to have become a bit colder, as if it was frozen. Chu Luiwei glanced at Meng Jingji, her heart filled with mixed feelings. Because she never thought that Meng Jingji would actually speak up for her. In her impression, she had only seen Meng Jingji a few times, and he always had a dark face and looked very fierce. In addition, she had supported Mu Qinghe to be the deputy general of the Black Cavalry, so to a certain extent she had divided up Meng Jingji's power. She had always thought that Meng Jingji didn't have a good impression of her. She didn't expect that. The newcomer has arrived. Give your first greeting, ascend the steps of the 9th heaven. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 866. At this moment, Jiang Yuqing and Xuanhuan had already walked over hand in hand and stood in the middle of the square in front of the hall. All the discussions had dissipated at this moment. Countless gazes were focused on the two of them. Xuanhuan was also dressed splendidly today. Her bright red phoenix tail trailed behind her. With every step she took, the golden threads buried in the cloud brocade material sparkled. Even though she was still covered with a veil and no one could see her appearance, just by looking at her attire, they could tell that she was very luxurious. Next, the two of them would walk up the 9 steps together and formally bow in front of Langkuan Hall. Logically speaking, since His Majesty was still alive, he should be waiting for the two of them in front of the door. However, because he was still unconscious, this step was omitted. Jiang Yuqing and Xuanhuan held hands tightly and stood side by side, looking like a perfect couple. Let's go. Jiang Yuqing tilted his head slightly with a smile on his face. His voice was also very gentle. It was as if the woman beside him was the love of his life. Xuanhuan nodded lightly. No one could see her expression at this moment. The two of them walked forward hand in hand. Xuanhuan took the lead and stepped onto the first step. Jianghu deliberately fell back half a step to show his respect. No one could find fault with his every word and action. Xuanhuan continued to walk up and stepped onto the second step. At this point, one could already feel the faint pressure spreading from the Xuanhuan palace. However, this was nothing to Xuanhuan and Jianghu. The two of them walked up step by step, and the pressure on their bodies also became heavier and heavier. Every time they walked up a step, they needed to mobilize more force to resist this increasingly stronger force. When they reached the seventh step, Xuanhuan felt a little powerless. Although she was now at the early stage of the 7th rank, she had just recovered her Yuan meridian after all, and the strength she could display was not that strong. His entire body felt like it was filled with lead, incomparably heavy. Jianghu, who was by the side, quickly noticed that something was amiss with Xuanhuan. During this period of time, he relied on some methods to barely recover his strength to the peak of the 7th stage. Although it was a little better than Xuanhuan, the pressure in the Xuanhuan palace was not to be underestimated. He secretly exerted more strength in his hand and sent Xuanhuan to the 8th step. Xuanhuan's legs trembled and her body swayed. Jianghu frowned inwardly and quickly supported her. Then he gritted his teeth and climbed to the 8th step. Standing here, he could clearly see that the door of Langkuan Hall was open. Usually the door to Langkuan Palace was tightly locked. Only during the coronation ceremony would the elders of the royal family work together to open it. Once this barrier was opened, the pressure of the Tianling scepter spread unstoppably in all directions. It was precisely because of this that Xuanhuan and Jianghu encountered such a terrifying pressure. The closer they got, the more shocking the aura was. The people standing in the square below were also staring intently. When they saw that Xuanhuan's footsteps seemed to be a little shaky, some people's expressions changed slightly. Did the third princess lose her footing just now? An extremely low voice came from the crowd. She was wearing a phoenix coronet and a robe with a wide skirt behind her. However, many people still saw her swaying just now. It shouldn't be, right? If she can't go up now, how can she raise the Tianling scepter? Someone retorted, but his tone was very uncertain. In the history of the Tianling dynasty, there were precedents of people who couldn't raise the Tianling scepter. After careful calculation, there were a total of 4 people. The final outcome of these people, without exception, was that they were all deprived of the right to inherit the imperial power and never had the chance to start over again. To them, this was an undeniable shame and humiliation. Even though they could retain their status as members of the imperial family and eat, wear, and use the same things as before, because of this failure, they would never be able to raise their heads again for the rest of their lives. Among the 4 people, 2 of them couldn't bear the pressure after the failure and chose to commit suicide. Another one was greedy for cultivation and ultimately suffered from chi deviation, severing his own Yuan meridian and dying. As for the last person, he never took a step out of the palace again and died in less than 3 years. It was obvious how important the matter of raising the Tianling scepter was to the heir to the throne. It was also because of this that every emperor would be especially careful when selecting their heirs. Most of them would be evaluated from a very young age based on their talents. They would first select a few with good conditions and focus on nurturing them. When they grew up, they would then select the best one. However, Xuanhuan was never the one who was chosen and thought highly of. On one hand, it was because her birth mother's status was low and she wasn't valued since she was young. On the other hand, she had never displayed any amazing talents and was even more invisible. Most importantly, ever since Xuanhuan was born and found to have the Tianjing Yuan meridian, the current emperor had directly selected her and never thought of a second person. The Tianjing Yuan meridian that only appeared once in 1,000 years was extremely precious. It was actually very normal for the emperor to do this. That's right. Oh, I don't know what to say. Anyway, I just feel that the two of them don't seem very happy. Although they're standing together, they seem to be a little distant from each other. In short, it's a little strange. They don't seem to be a good match. It wasn't that she hadn't seen people get married before. Although the occasion wasn't so grand, most of the people who got married were very affectionate. Just by looking at each other without saying anything, one could tell that they were really in love. However, Xuanhuan and Jianghu didn't feel that way. Chu Luiyue smiled slightly. How are they not a good match? I think they're a match made in heaven. Seeing the two of them standing on the steps and bowing to get married, she felt a burst of joy in her heart. Fortunately, she didn't marry Jianghu back then. Otherwise, she would be disgusted for the rest of her life. Such a man was the best match for Xuanhuan. On the stage, Xuanhuan was also smiling. The two of them seemed to be very happy, but only they knew what they were thinking at the moment. Jiang Yuqing reached out and held Xuanhuan's hand. Xuanhuan felt cold all over and only felt disgusted in her heart. However, she didn't dare to forcefully break free and could only smile again. The two of them were equally matched in acting. For a moment, they confused many people who didn't know the inside story. In the eyes of most people, everything was going smoothly. The two of them standing on the steps were also harmonious and beautiful. At this moment, the old man who was singing the ceremony opened his mouth again. Please, Tianling Scepter. This voice was full of energy and echoed in the sky above Lang Kuan Palace for a long time. It was transmitted clearly to everyone's ears. Everyone's spirits were lifted. Immediately they focused their attention and looked over. The remaining 5 elders of the imperial family nodded and turned to enter Lang Kuan Palace. Countless eyes were focused on the door, eager and excited. They all knew that what was about to happen next was the real grand finale. Buzz! A deafening roar suddenly came from the Lang Kuan Palace. Many people were shocked and hurriedly used their force to set up a barrier in front of them. Swoosh! The elder who was singing the ceremony waved his sleeve and set up a silver barrier at the bottom of the steps, blocking this terrifying fluctuation. At this moment, the 5 elders finally walked out of Lang Kuan Palace. A huge square black crystal was moved out by the few of them. Then it sat on the ground. Bang! A muffled sound. Almost even the ground trembled fiercely. That black crystal was half the height of a person, and on top of it, there was a scepter floating quietly. The lustrous glow shrouded it, and its appearance couldn't be seen clearly, but its power was shocking.